believe in the ripple effect.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Ricardo Rendes, also known as Ricky Francis, and a great and long episode for you today. Today we have my dear friend Ryan Graham from the Independent Review Podcast. If you're not familiar with that podcast, please check it out. You can find most of the episodes on YouTube, but he also has a Rumble channel, and it's available on all the other podcast apps like iTunes and Spotify and anywhere you listen to podcasts. Ryan's show is similar to the Grand Theft World podcast, and I think he's compared it to that show and also said it inspired him to do a show similar to that type of format where he combines a bunch of clips from a bunch of different shows in the alternative media community that he enjoys, and then he shares it with the listeners. So I know many of us don't listen to podcasts probably as much as Ryan or myself do, but if you're looking for a way to be exposed to new content creators, new podcasters, new researchers and journalists, check out the Independent Review Podcast, and you'll see important clips and important segments from tons of great content creators in the alternative media community. So I'll put links to that show in the show description. And Ryan also runs a custom t-shirt and merch store called Big Frog. I'll put links to that in the show description also. But before we get into this very long and hopefully interesting conversation about a lot of different topics, let me remind you this is a value for value show. If you get any value out of these discussions I bring to you, please consider giving some value back. It doesn't have to be financial. Like I always remind you guys, you can rate the show, review the show, post the show anywhere you want. All my work is open source. And that goes a long way because wherever you're listening or watching Ripple Effect podcasts, liking and commenting and subscribing will help with the algorithms. But if you can financially support the show, please consider doing so. We spend so much money on so many ridiculous things that don't bring any real value or sustainable value to our lives. And I put a lot of work into picking the guests that I have on the show and the topics we discuss and talk about. I take a lot of time away from my friends and family and hobbies and work to have time to book, schedule guests, research, record, edit, upload, and all the other time-consuming things that are required in putting together a podcast and sharing it with the world. So if you guys get some value out of these discussions, if you think there's some value in the Ripple Effect podcast and you enjoy listening to these shows, please consider giving some value back. You can support us on Patreon, and if you are considering supporting us on Patreon, just remember no donation is too little. If a small percentage of the people who listen and watch the Ripple Effect podcast donated as little as $1 a month, I could easily do the show full time. And that shows you how little you have to contribute to really make a big difference in my life and hopefully the lives of people who listen to and enjoy the Ripple Effect podcast. You can also send a one-time donation via PayPal or Venmo, or send crypto to our crypto wallet. And you can find all these links in the show description. And thank you everyone who has sent amazing donations and great reminders that people out there do care about the show, do care about the content, and they want to show their support by sending a one-time donation. And then if you want to check out some merch, if you want to let everybody know that you listen to the Ripple Effect podcast, hopefully spark some conversations by wearing some cool merch, go to the Ripple Effect podcast merch.com or find links on my website or in the show description. But you can check out mugs, t-shirts, all the stuff you see me wearing on the show, or the cups and mugs you see me drinking out of. All that stuff comes from my merch store. So check it out. Find a design, a logo you like, browse around. We have kids' clothes, hoodies, stickers, tons of different stuff. So hopefully you can find something cool you like and also support a show that you enjoy. And then we have a couple sponsors. The first one being Content Safe. If you're a streamer, content creator, YouTuber, podcaster, and you want to find a much quicker way of getting your videos on all the video platforms you're on, check out Content Safe. Let them know you're a listener of the Ripple Effect podcast, and they'll definitely take care of you. And then the next sponsor is the University of Reason. If you're at a crossroads in life, if you feel like you need a change, if you feel like you need to connect with a different community, a freedom-minded, liberty-minded community, check out the University of Reason. Check out the autonomy courses created by Richard Grove. And when you do, please use the link in the show description or on my website, and hopefully you can help yourself and the Ripple Effect podcast at the same time. And then last but not least, Element Electrolytes, created and formulated by a OG in the health and nutrition community, Rob Wolf. And if you guys have been listening to health and nutrition podcasts, or if you've been watching documentaries on health and nutrition, then you definitely have run into his work. He has the very popular book and documentary called Sacred Cow. He's been on the Rogan podcast quite a few times, and he created a amazing electrolyte product that will keep you hydrated, not kick you out of fasting, won't kick you out of ketosis, no artificial colors, no artificial flavors, and has the right dosages of the right electrolytes that you need to optimize your body and mind. Most of the electrolyte products and drinks out there don't have enough of the electrolytes you need to actually make a difference in your performance. Most of them don't have enough electrolytes to actually make a difference in regards to some of the symptoms you get from dehydration, like headaches and muscle fatigue and cramping. So if you play sports, if you work outside, if you're going on vacation and you want to stay hydrated while being out in the sun, or maybe you like to go out on weekends and you want to stay hydrated to limit your hangover, check out Element Electrolytes. Use the link in the show description, get a free gift with every purchase. And this stuff tastes amazing. I drink it. I was drinking it before they ever became a sponsor. They became a sponsor after I had Rob Wolf on the show to talk about health and nutrition, because he knew I loved the product. And if you use the link in the show description or on my website for Element Electrolytes, you'll also find all the science to back his claims and all the science and benefits in getting these electrolytes into your system, because drinking water will get hydration into your body, but to really get the hydration, the fluids into your muscles and tissue, you need electrolytes, and you need the right ones. It's sweetened with stevia, which is a natural sweetener. You can also use Element to make cocktails, and then also they offer flavors like mocha and chocolate to put in hot drinks. So if you want to put it in your coffee and stay hydrated while having caffeine, that's another great way of enjoying Element Electrolytes. So please, if you can afford it, please consider helping and supporting a show you enjoy. I have plenty of great episodes right around the corner. One being with the filmmaker of The Cost of Convenience, where we talk about big tech and censorship. It's a great documentary. You're going to learn a lot more about that on the next Ripple Effect podcast. Then after that, look out for a special episode on MH370 and the missing airplane, and all the theories and craziness around that story for the 10-year anniversary of the missing plane. So tons of great shows right around the corner. Also, subscribe to my Clips channel. I'm going to try to be more active on there. I do have a YouTube Clips channel. And that's it. Enjoy this amazing conversation with Ryan Graham from the Independent Review. And I will talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.
Start with even just getting into this. It was about 2019. My business partner and I, he was asking me about, have you heard about, Epstein? Have you heard of Whitney Webb? And honestly, like I hadn't at all. And I was like, who's that? What's going on? And he's like, it's pretty insane. And this was probably the spring of 2019. So it was before, his arrest and his, suicide. And so I started looking into it. Whitney's the first one I found. And that was kind of, let's just say, quite the rabbit hole to start with Whitney. So that just kind of led me to further see, who did it bring me to next? Oh, Ryan Christian. So that was my next kind of realm I kind of saw. And then I saw Corbett. And then I eventually saw yourself after that. Scott Armstrong was another one I found. And that I will say that was kind of like a snowball effect for me. I've always been, I guess, in a sense, a nonconformist in a lot of ways, but not to this degree of like, mainstream, I just kind of ignored it if it wasn't affecting me for the most part. So kind of just going through life, went through, lived all over the country, but, went to school, pretty normal life, got out. Buddy asked me to start a business with him. So we did that. And we were doing that for about, that was 2011. So opened in 2012. So we're about 12 years now. So it was quite deep into it, just kind of going through the motions. I didn't have my first kid till 2016, end of 2016. And then I had my son in 2020, which was an experience itself. But because of that realm, I'm very grateful for it, because that way I felt like I was more aware of what was going on, especially, Ryan's like in-depth daily 4-hour shows, and, bringing on the studies, by McCullough, or even really early on talking about the Operation Warp Speed and what they were already talking about doing. That was pretty much showing everything that, was talked about a whole year later. So it was very interesting to see, bringing up mass studies originally, bringing up all the stuff they had been talking about, leading up to, 2020, Event 201, all that. Like in the very beginning, I'm just like, wait, what? I'm not hearing any of this anywhere, So it was and there's how much it was censored. That got me to, I talked to Scott originally, just doing shirts for him. And I was kind of really just wanting to archive a lot of this stuff, because everything kept getting taken down, like everywhere. As it's like, you could barely get it on. I forgot even what apps I had to go to, like special podcast apps that I could finally find. Video wise, I didn't know about, a lot of the places like BitChute and Odyssey yet. So my limitation of Google and YouTube knowledge wasn't going to help me find anything. So I was lucky enough to, Scott lent me some areas to look. And that was my goal, was to archive this for myself and even my kids, just because it seems to get erased. So my thought, I was talking to Scott, was like, Grand Theft World does a really good job, but it's a longer, obviously, about 6 hours sometimes every Sunday, which is great. They do such a good in-depth job. I was thinking more of someone more simple-minded like myself, and didn't have as much time with work, and I'm stuck in traffic so much. That's kind of where I listen to a lot of this, and it helps me. But a lot of even my friends who are kind of on, I hate using the word normally, but, kind of on that realm, of could be there, could be not. It sometimes too much information is just like, they're bored with it. They don't care. They don't want to even. So if I could find it in a shorter version and recap those, I thought that was kind of, so he kind of pushed me into, you should make this into a show. And being that I'm not huge on my own voice or myself on video as much, so I thought it'd be kind of funny, just do it differently and kind of make it kind of a crappy animation, like intentionally, kind of like original South Park, where it was like, paper cutouts, and it was intentionally bad. And that made it kind of easier and more fun to add a little bit of, humor to it, with mostly never, it's not always good news that you're getting to put out there, because I don't want it to be this black pill doom and gloom type, but it also is just, here's actually what's happening at the same time. Right. So that's kind of how it led to that. And then from there, just started doing more stuff with, Steve with shirts. And then that led to, Steve even put me on Fridays, which was pretty crazy. I didn't think that would happen. And, all thanks to Scott getting me, started on everything. And then that's kind of led to just a few other side projects just for fun. And yeah, what I thought would be someone else would do as an idea, I ended up just doing it. So it's taken a lot of a time, but it is like a fun, rewarding stress, if that makes sense. Like to add to it.
Well, if it makes you feel better, none of us like to listen to ourselves.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I struggle to do clips. I just hate listening to a whole podcast, and a lot of times when I do clips, I try to go back and find old shows that I think were really good, or at least had really good guests. And I hesitate to say really good, because I think I sucked back in the day. I still suck now, but I sucked even worse then. And it's like, sometimes I'm just like, I'm like, I sound like an idiot, or, I just can't get through the episode because I'm like just searching for that clip. And then I'm just like super indecisive. It's like, okay, should I clip this out? Let me keep listening. Let me, so it does get, and I'm sure you probably have similar struggles with, doing your show, because it's kind of very similar. You're taking out clips, but luckily you don't have to listen to yourself.
Listen to myself. Yeah. I've yet to put myself on at all. But no, I 100%. But I will say, I'm not trying to kiss your ass or anything. But you have a good you have a good like tone to your voice. It sounds good via like podcast. It's well it's well produced. The sound's always really good. Everything audio wise comes out very well. Yeah, I always stress on even just little like doing AI voices because I was going to originally voice over. And so I'd mess with like, an Alex Jones or a Hank Hill or something like that. And then that sometimes the AI is so bad you couldn't hear it. So I've gone through so many different programs to try to edit. And some of them have them, built in now. So it sounds a little AI, but sometimes I'll mix it up and have a little fun with some goofy voices on there. Better myself.
Well, I don't know if you listened to the episode I did with the Intel whistleblower East Palestine guy, but he didn't want his identity to be known, so I made
Yeah.
it sound like one of those dark, like,
Yeah.
and a lot of videos on YouTube, like you can tell that they purposely try to get that feel because it makes the information even seem more intriguing because it's like, oh my
Mhm.
God, it's like sounds like a horror movie. It's scary. It has this deep tone. This person has a disguised voice, so it must be something secretive. So stuff like that's fun too. One question I did wanted to ask because I know like you seem like you do a really good job of like, hey, I just want to highlight these people that I like and the information that I think is important. But sometimes I am curious, like, just from like my personal stance, you'll take a clip from a conversation, and I'm like, I wonder why he found this part of the conversation intriguing and why he
Mhm.
picked this part of the conversation, not just my work, but like everybody's work. Like, because obviously you're listening to, typically I'm assuming you're listening to a big part of a episode, and then something sticks out, and either you're writing it down or you just kind of make a mental note of it. Have you ever thought about like just sharing, like, hey, this next clip is from the Ripple Effect podcast. I chose this clip because they're expanding on this topic or that issue, something like that.
Mhm. Yeah, sometimes I will admit like a New World Next Week, with Pilato and Corbett. Sometimes I'll just play the whole thing because it's not super long, but it is kind of like a good weekly wrap up. So in that sense, I'm just like I'm gonna play the whole thing if I can fit it in. But there are times, yeah, where most of the time, I'd say 90% of the time, I'm getting this listening in traffic. Um, so because depending on, I don't even live that far away from work, but because of how bad traffic is, it can be about hour or 2 hours each way. So it's depending on the day. So that's where something will click. I'll usually do like a mental note and I'll be like, oh, that's kind of like interesting, or it just caught my attention. Or maybe it was a topic like, let's just say it was a current event, such as um, let's say what's a recent one? Miriam on Nature Boy show. And she was, mentioning the spraying in the airport, and she was kind of reflecting on that. And that caught my eye of like, oh, okay, they'd already talked about Anarchapulco, which nothing against that, but I've already had some clips on that. So I was really trying to do something that's slightly different. I try not to make it all the exact same because I feel like the other issue I run into is as I'm trying to not necessarily expand to as many as possible, but I don't want to have too much of a limited hangout in a sense of only these people. Because I do kind of like where Ryan does say to question everything, even himself, right? Which I love. But and that's good just to kind of keep people to do your research. Just don't take people's words for it, or if they have good source info, that's a good thing to kind of go by, right? But sometimes I feel like maybe I do too many of the same, and I'm like, I gotta like try to expand it a little bit. Even though those people are really good, there's a reason why I play them, but I don't want to have too much of a if that makes sense. I kind of went off track on that. Sorry.
No,
I
no,
kind of
it
ramble.
makes sense because I do a similar thing just for like mental exercise. Like
Mhm.
I feel like if I listen to like everybody has like go-to podcasts, but I have
Yeah.
go-to podcasts in like certain months of the year. Like all of a sudden I'll be binging on somebody that I haven't listened to in a while. And then, I'm like, oh, I'm listening to too much of them and I'm getting too much of only this perspective. So I need to expand my horizons. I need to go listen to somebody else. And then I'll go listen to another show that I haven't listened to in a while. And maybe even somebody I disagree with, but I just want to, like just recently, because she's been doing a lot of interviews. I'm like, I haven't listened, like, I haven't taken time to listen to Candace Owens in a long time.
Mhm.
She's just one of those people. I'm like, oh, kind of a conservative, like what's interesting about, her views. I kind of know her stance on everything. Like nothing, seems to attract me to her in regards to that. But then I saw her on the PBD podcast with Cuomo, and she was saying all the things that I say every time Cuomo talks, and it's like this guy's a fucking idiot. Like he really, like I don't know why people like him. I'm like
Mhm.
he literally just talks in circles and never says anything that you're like, wow, that's really profound, or that's really like he doesn't ever come off as an intellect. He just, he's just an idiot. Like he doesn't even make sense. And it's funny because well, she gained a lot of my respect because he's like 6'4" and this big jacked Italian dude, and she just like called him out, and I loved it. And I'm like, I like people even if I don't agree with them. I
Yeah.
like people who have the courage to like call somebody out if they feel like they're being dishonest, and or basically just said like, hey, you're like not answering questions and you're beating around the bush. um so recently, and then there's obviously all the celebrity stuff that's coming out with like the P Diddy. Speaking of
Mhm.
Jeffrey Epstein, like Puff Daddy is basically the musical Jeffrey Epstein in regards to just his web of lies, and like Clyde Davis, and like he possibly a victim of Clyde Davis who was molesting artists, and allegedly, of course, I don't want to get sued, but
Mhm.
but Clyde Davis, and then just Usher possibly being a victim, and then also being victimized. That guy who was the founder of NSYNC and Backstreet Boys,
Mhm.
like him, like all these people are like, and a lot of these people similar to Epstein, like will eventually the web will lead to some of the similar names and faces, and you get a lot of the same characters popping up. But she was outspoken about that, and I gave her, so I ran in a couple of videos, but I'm just like, okay, yeah, this is just like a fresh perspective, and maybe I don't agree or like all her work, and maybe in the past I've ignored a lot of her stuff, but I'm like, I just need it's your brain's just like any muscle. Like you need muscle confusion, right? You can't. I find myself like if you listen, it's no different than like the people you hang out with. If you hang out with them long enough, you start repeating, like everybody starts
Yes.
sounding the same, or
Mhm.
so it's like, I completely get what you're saying. Like, hey, you know what? Like fresh perspectives, different, opinions, different, and sometimes I'll just completely ignore current events and news, and I'll just like, let me dive into like some philosophy again, or, it's just something to like mentally stimulate me and kind of help me not get stuck in the echo chamber of like, oh, I'm just listening to everybody who agrees with me and everybody who is
Mhm.
saying the same things I'm saying. But that's great if I can be 100% certain that I'm right and I've exercised all the other options and possibilities, but can't possibly do that. So it's important, like you said, to constantly question things, question even the people you enjoy, because
Mhm.
even us, on our shows, like we might have a perspective that, might change later as we gather more information or as we grow or whatever. So yeah, I like the fact that you're consciously thinking about that. I'm friends with Richard Grove, and I bust his balls all the time. I'm like, you start every show with Luke. I'm like, why do you start every show with Luke? I'm like, how much is he paying you to get him on, the opening, so and Luke does great work. And,
Mhm.
but it just, again, like you said, like it's just it would be nice to kind of just change the order of sometimes the videos you put out there.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny you say that because I do go in that same realm, and I compare it to music too. I feel like not that I don't listen to just a lot of different types of music, but I do that seasonally as well. I find myself different types of the year listening to different types of music more, and I do that the same with podcasts too. And then I'll forget. Like just the other day, I had just because I like a lot of the stuff she's put out with Maddie Bannon, and I was like, oh, she was on James Jordan's, Liberty Radio. And I was like, gosh, I haven't listened to his for a while because I get sucked into a bunch of other ones. But I agree, like even the mainstream, not necessarily mainstream, that's probably the one thing I can't watch, like, like actual like NBC stuff. It's kind of, I don't know, it's rough. It drives me a little nuts. I should probably more because it's always good to get a counter narrative, even if it is just complete, propaganda. But like the next level, like a Rogan, or even I guess I don't watch a ton of Tucker or Russell, but sometimes like Russell had Whitney on, so I'm definitely going to check that out, or stuff like that. Or sometimes it's just like you said, it's good to get like a different perspective to kind of put you in check, or I don't know. Yeah, like you said, work your brain more. So it's not just the same stuff. I leave the mainstream made fun of like AM Wake Up because they do a good job of like if there's something on like MSNBC or CNN that's kind of funny, I'll watch it on that because at least there's some humor tied to where too many like relatives that'll be like that's they're kind of the boomer age, so they're obsessed with that type of and I can see how it affects them. And that's like probably the one thing I try not to expose my kids to, besides, well, there's a lot of things obviously, but like that's one thing I just never want in front of them is like the fear mongering, mainstream news. I'm a little biased against that, I guess. I'll admit that.
Yeah, well, I sometimes I like I said a Candace or a PBD. I listen to them just because I'm just curious what the mainstream
Yeah.
is saying. Like
Hmm.
because if we're I love Tinfoil Hat podcast, obviously.
Yeah.
Charlie Robinson, OBDM,
Hmm.
all my buddies, Grimerica, all the people I listen to on a regular basis. But sometimes I'm like, okay, what's the normies like
Hmm.
thinking? And what are they discussing and what just kind of get their perspective. So that's why like yourself, like I'll listen to a Tucker, I'll listen to a Russell Brand, I'll listen to a Candace Owens, even though like I said I give her credit because she is pushing back on
Hmm.
calling P Diddy the Jeffrey Epstein of music, and she
Yeah.
also was on Bill Maher not too long ago and questioning the moon landing, and they got in a little debate, and I'm like, okay, she's like dipping her toe in this
Okay.
conspiracy world a little bit. So I like that, and I know there's a lot of people in our community that are like, oh, Russell Brand's not one of us, or this Tucker's not, and I get it, like I
Hmm.
do, but I also don't like if they do good work, I don't want to discredit you know everything because you don't like something they did in the past or a view that they had at some point. It's like, you know what, you need those people on our side to get through to some of these other people, right? And
Hmm.
when Tim Dillon years ago had Whitney Webb
Yeah.
on his
Hmm.
show, I thought that was huge. I knew of Whitney and I was like stunned. I'm like, dude, I cannot believe Tim Dillon is huge comedian. And well, actually, he wasn't like super popular at the time. Thanks to the Rogan effect,
Yeah.
he made him huge. But at the time, he was pretty popular and
Hmm.
pretty mainstream. And he's talking to Whitney Webb about like the really deep state, Epstein pedo child trafficking stuff. I'm like, this is wild. And there's plenty of people who don't go down those rabbit holes that listen to Tim Dillon or listen to a Russell Brand that are now going to be exposed to those things. And even Tucker has gone down some rabbit holes and pushes back against some things. And I think we need those people. I don't see them as a bad thing. Like I think like of
Hmm.
course like you should never have any heroes and think they're the messiah or the savior and believe everything they say. But even like I'm a huge Rogan fan, much like yourself. I'm sure you've heard this story, but I used to do a lot of commuting myself, and same thing, a couple hour drive to and from work. And Rogan was like the first podcast that I'm like, wow, this is really interesting. And this is really helping with my commute because I can only listen to the same music over and over again for, 2 hours. And especially when the average song length is 3 or 4 minutes, it's like, how many songs do I need to fill up this 2 hour drive? And I can just listen to podcasts, and Rogan's were 2 to 3 hours. So I'm like, wow, I listen to one podcast and I'm home. And so it was a huge help, but I don't always agree with everybody that he had on. I didn't always agree with a lot of his perspectives. I used to hate how much he loved Sam Harris. I used to hate how much he loved Stefan Molyneux, and like certain people that he had on back in the day. I'm like, why? And then as time went by, his opinions would evolve. And I think
Hmm.
people who listen to anybody for that long, you kind of get, when Sam and I would talk about this, or even Eddie Bravo, like, they all said like Rogan's a good guy. He's one of the good
Hmm.
guys. And I didn't believe him just because they were saying it. I believed it because like I've been listening to him for so long that when you do 3 hours, and at when we started listening, I'm probably when you started listening to him too, like it was live streamed, so like it was unedited. And it's like if you listen to somebody unedited for that long, for 3 hours, and he was doing 4 shows a week, sometimes even 5, like you kind of get a grasp of who this person is, right? And especially when he's talking
Mhm.
about so many different topics, and it's like I might not agree with him, but I feel like he's pretty sincere, and he's also one of the few people that would defend Alex Jones, even though he was a mainstream person. And Joe Rogan would have no reason to defend Alex Jones. There were friends he could have easily avoided, talking about him, but he would bring him up sometimes and he'd be like, he's more right than he's wrong. And I've known him for this long and whatever. And so I give him a lot of credit for that. And I think we need to, build bridges, not burn them. And if we get some of these people on our side, and I think people are, I mean, what's your perspective on, like, do you think, because you go down these rabbit holes, do you find that you can have these conversations, like, as every year goes by, you can have these conversations with more and more of your friends and family without being looked at like a crazy person?
Yeah, not as, I wish it was bigger of a circle. But yeah, no, I would totally agree. I feel like as time goes by, it is expanding more. And I think it is like I totally agree. Like a lot of these guys, and I don't know, I'm sure, if you're playing the odds, there's got to be someone with like a different kind of agenda behind. I'm not saying it's like a WEF agenda, but maybe it's more just like I want clicks, right? So I'm gonna only talk about this and I'm gonna censor myself on this. Like I know a lot of people, gosh, what's the guy's name? Always talk about, was it a Tim Pool is another one, which I've listened. It's not like I don't listen to him, but I've like to where maybe they self censor on. They'll go to a certain point and stop. But I will say, like you said, if they are that popular, at least you can suck some people in as like just to get into those topics, like Tim Dillon, like you were saying, like the majority of his audience isn't watching him to see Whitney Webb. And I remember that was crazy when I saw Whitney get on there. I was like, this is so cool. And then you kind of get them into that, and you can hope that because of their popularity, that can almost be like a gatekeep to get in. I know that you can gatekeep in other ways, but I do think the majority of people are pretty just curious in general, and if you can if those are the main people that are out there and you can even just expose a little bit, you got to at least give them a little credit for, hey, you had like, Whitney Webb on here to expose that. That's pretty big. Like who else was I thinking? Even like Corbett was just on Dr. Drew for all shows. That was crazy. Like that's so big to have Corbett on something that large, and it's not like I'm gonna think Corbett's like a a sellout or anything like that. That's big. Like I might not agree with everything Dr. Drew. I'm glad he's kind of changed his stance. I don't know if that's just a natural change or if it is for because that's what's okay now. But regardless of that, to get Corbett that kind of exposure, right? I mean, he's one of the best there is. So that's to get more of a normal person to get exposed to him and see the kind of work he's put out. And maybe, I mean, yeah, that would be, that's one of the main people I try to get out. A lot of them that are kind of like, I wouldn't say on the edge, but they're easy to listen to. They got a good knowledge. Um, they're not just spitting out nonsense, that you don't hear. So like, I'm not going to listen to that. If it's more of a, someone who's not going to dive right in, but it's like, hey, they're kind of methodical about this. They're very educated sounding how they put their info out. A lot of certain people I know, that would be a good way to kind of encroach them. So if they hear a good conversation, like, even Rogan having McCullough on, like that was huge. I mean, he wasn't on anything. Like, I mean, so, regardless of how people feel about him, he still like give credit where it's due, right? If they're actually going to say, like you said, there's going to be times where you don't agree and you're like, gosh, this is just, no. But then there's other times like, well, this is important though. Like, the whole vaccine thing, that was very, you know, taboo. You couldn't talk about that. And to get that out there during that time when it was just, I mean, I'm sure where you were at was not fun during that time. I know in our state wasn't either. And I don't know if you got to travel much during that time, but it was interesting to see just in a few different states. I got to see that it was like night and day different of how they treated it. And I was like, wow, it's a whole different world. And I kind of get seeing that perspective, from other people too. It can kind of reflect on those shows of just kind of where they're at, what they're dealing with. Because some people didn't realize how bad it is in other states. Like that was yeah.
Oh yeah, Florida was definitely a spot we went to often. Luckily, my
I don't blame you.
family down there. Yeah, I live in Massachusetts. You live in which state?
Oregon, yeah.
Oregon. Oh,
Yeah.
geez.
Yeah, just outside of Portland. So it's yeah,
Oh,
it was,
yeah. I'm actually the Blazers are my West Coast team. So
nice. Well, Celtics were my first team because I didn't always live in Oregon, but my parents grew up here. And at the time, all I got was, national Celtic games with Larry Bird. So that was my first. That's my East Coast
Oh,
team
that's
for.
funny. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I grew up when the Celtics were horrendous. Like, so I got into basketball in the 90s and the Celtics were pretty consistently,
Yeah.
not good. And so but I was a big Scottie Pippen fan. And when
Hmm.
Scottie went to the Blazers, I'm like, "Oh, okay." I'm like Blazers and Celtics have one thing in common. They both hate the Lakers. I'm like, I
Hmm.
can get on board with this. So I was such a big basketball fan, and I just needed another team to root for, and the Blazers were really good at the time. So, they were constantly, going far in the playoffs and great regular season record. And I was a big Arvydas Sabonis fan, being a
Yeah.
European myself. And so, I'd watch and then it just stuck with me, and it was funny because and then when COVID happened, I'm like, oh my God, my two favorite teams. I'm so embarrassed to even wear anything that says, the name on there, Portland or Boston, because it was
Hmm.
just like, it was, I didn't wear anything Celtics. I didn't watch any basketball for a while. We slowly getting back into it because now we can finally watch sports without, every 2 seconds getting a Moderna commercial down our throat. But soccer was basically what we watched because we could put it on at the start of the game. You have 45 minutes of straight sports, no commercials. At halftime, you can, go get distracted by going to get a snack or food or whatever, and then come back, watch the rest of the game, and you can kind of avoid all the propaganda. So soccer was, I've always loved soccer, but it was like our primary sport during those years. And but yeah, it was tough, man. It was I'm sure much like yourself, like we're fighting with the school board. We end up homeschooling. Well, you
I
got
got lucky in that sense.
yeah.
I hadn't quite reached that age yet, but
Yeah. Well,
just wasn't born
so
during it.
my daughter and because you said you had a kid in 2016.
Yeah, at the very end. So it was like December 30th. So she's basically born 2017. So she was um in we had like a preschool, and that lady that we knew in our town, it's like we live in an outside town, but it's, a smaller town that was more. I mean, that's another story of like a lot of the business owners I know here. I don't own a business here, but we're closer to Portland, but more aligned. I was able to tell them how we stayed open and the way we did it worked without trying to get political and getting attacked. And it kind of worked here. A lot of the places did the same, but that long story short, that teacher was up at, a little preschool, wasn't part of the actual state system. And she wasn't into any of that stuff. So they just let them do whatever they want. And that was great. So she got that. So I got lucky. She wasn't quite into the system yet of dealing with that.
Yeah, my daughter's August 2016, and then my son's February 2015. But yeah, so yeah, similar thing. Like we had some people that a friend of mine who manages a gym. Like he wasn't. He left the gym open. He was the last gym to like close in like this part of Massachusetts. Everybody else was closed. He dealt with every bump in the road that they threw at him. He's like, okay, I'll do it. He's like, what's my maximum capacity? Fine, I'll have a line out the door and I'll let people, when one person leaves, I'll let, he's like, what do I have to do? And he just did everything he could to keep the business running. And there were some amazing people who stepped up. And I think that's kind of the weird thing about COVID is that it exposed some people. Like there's some people that like, even, family members of my wife and mine that like, I'm just like, you know what? Like I like them, everything's cool, you forgive and you forget. But well, you forgive, but you don't forget,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
you end up thinking like if shit hits the fan, like I know who you are, like you've been
Hmm.
exposed. Like I know in a crisis situation, if our ideologies don't align, you will pick a team real quick, and you have no loyalty to anything but your worldview and ideology. And I had a lot of people in my personal life that were like that. There's people still today that we walk by each other and I'll smile and I'll talk to anybody, but they won't even look at me, and because of just going back and forth. And I typically I post and ghost, like I usually just use social media just to kind of, get the word out there. Hey, here's a clip I made. Here's a cool documentary I watched. Here's a new episode. But during that time, one, we had plenty of free time. And two, it kind of sparked a new fire because I've been, I've been podcasting since 2013, and there's a lot of rabbit holes I already went down,
Hmm.
a lot, and it was just like you kind of lose your no, shouldn't say motivation, but like your excitement for topics and your, and it's like, okay, I've done this topic, I've done that topic, I've been down this rabbit hole. But then when COVID happened, it's like I was so upset as a parent watching kids mask up, watching kids play sports with masks. The kid thing just like it made me so upset that every time I talk about it, I could, I'd get worked up. And it's just like I was so stunned and I was so saddened by how quickly people complied and how little people pushed back and how often I would tell people, I'm like, if it doesn't make sense to you, it's because it doesn't make sense. Like over and over again, I'm like, why are they having us do this? And like, and I'm like, does that make sense to you? And people would be like, well, no, but I'm like, if like, go with your gut. If it doesn't make sense, it's because it doesn't make sense. Like, and with me, I've always been that type of person where like, I don't ever just believe somebody for the sake of believing them. Like I will take my time to think about it. And, that's why a lot of times I don't even talk about current events on my show because I'm always concerned about being wrong. I'm like, if I have an opinion too quickly, I'm like, I could be on the wrong side of history. Like I could end up adopting a opinion that, a week from now I don't have. So I'm like, you really need time to analyze things, do like what we talked about before, like hear different perspectives, hear different opinions, and kind of gather things. But during COVID, I was so certain that I knew what was going on because I've been in the medical freedom conversation forever. I've had tons of doctors and PhDs that people call pseudoscience for years. Dr. Rupert Sheldrake, Dr. Gregory Smith, Dr. Brzezinski, just so many different people in that realm of like, hey, medicine is the biggest mafia out there. And so many people just in the alternative media weren't even talking about it. I mean, if you go back prior to 2020, it was a small percentage of the content in the alternative media community. Like people weren't talking about just like the just the scam that prescription drugs are, antidepressants, vaccines, all the bullshit science that's all based on all that type of stuff. You get a Jennifer McCarthy and people, and people would call her a kook. You get a Tom Cruise talking about antidepressants. Like, yeah, he is a kook, but he's right about that. Like he's right that like if you look at the history of a DSM, it's all based on nonsense. Like it's not scientific at all. They call things a chemical, and that's the thing about experts. They're so good at using language as a weapon. Like they'll call things a chemical imbalance and then they'll give you a pill and it sounds scientific like, oh, my doctor said I have a chemical imbalance, that's why I'm on this pill. It's like, what, did they test you for a chemical imbalance? No. So how do they know which chemicals imbalance and how imbalanced it is, how much of this drug you need? Like it's obvious that it's like it's not scientific at all and it's all just made up. And yet they're just writing prescriptions like for it's like same thing with cholesterol, the statins. Like statins is one of the biggest scams out there. I'm like, do you know how they came up with a number that they start prescribing statins to you? I'm like, the recommendation number, like it comes from the statin companies, the companies that make the product. Why wouldn't they put the number low? Like it makes no sense. And if they control the studies, they will use any studies they want to get any outcome they want. Just like that's why when Dopesick came out, I was actually kind of stunned that they released it during COVID because I would constantly tell people, I'm like, listen, use my Hulu account. I'm like, you need to watch this because don't take my word for it. Here's history repeating. Watch how the FDA gets, paid off, how they control their own studies, how they control, they control everything, and they can just push a dangerous product onto the public, and how easy it is, and it did open some people's eyes, but. I just love the fact that even the vaccine conversation, which was my kids have never had one vaccine. I've always been anti-vax, even before I had kids, and my wife was all on board until we had kids, and the pediatrician did the fear mongering that they typically do. So then she's like, "Are you sure we're not doing something dangerous?" I'm like, "Yes, I'm sure." I'm like, "Remember before we met the pediatrician, like." That opinion you had that was based on information you read and documentaries we watched and interviews and lectures we saw. I'm like, that information is still correct. All that she's doing is scaring the shit out of you, So just go with your gut, and maybe that's the moral of the story is like gut.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're totally right on that. And that's funny to hear the perspective of, prior to 2019, how like little that's talked about. Because, in my sense, I wasn't exposed to any of that. So I didn't know. So going into 2020, other than, well, because 2019 was more Epstein related. So yeah, going into 2020, listening to Ryan was like the first time I'm hearing this. And it's more kind of just like, okay, what's going on? But then you get that exposed all those rabbit holes besides a mass study, but you go into the vaccine studies and then you go back to the PCR test dilemma and like the SARS thing. And I think it was 2012 and, explaining all those falsities. And then that kind of opened my world to how disgusting big pharma is and how it is big mafia. And they're not talked about as much as like a big oil or the other, war machines, which are pretty easier to talk about and flame up. But no one really wants to talk about the big pharma that sponsors everything. And so that was like a big awakening. So that in that sense, I was trying to, even to a certain degree, even now, some people I try to give a little more benefit of the doubt. If you just don't know and you're not exposed to it because they don't show you, if you don't, it's kind of a weird term, but I guess if you don't know, you just don't know. So I don't want to like fault people because I was, at some point I was that realm. Like, so like my first daughter, when she was 26, I didn't know any of that. So by the time I had my son, I was like, no. I mean, well, no, it would have been right after he was born. So like 3 months after, I was like, okay, well, from here on out, we're done. So the only exposure I really had to that was like my dog at the vet. I think it was that year. It might have even been that year. And she was just due for like her rabies and something like that. And they said, well, she also is due for these, and I didn't know this was prior to me learning a lot of this stuff, even on the dog side, right? And she came home, and she just started having like a seizure. Eyes went back. She had no health issues prior to that. And I was like, what the heck's like, she was not doing well. So I called them like, yeah, we gave her too many at once. We shouldn't have done that. Like they fully just said like, yeah, we shouldn't do that. And I was like, well, maybe she shouldn't have any at this point. Like I was kind of like, oh, there's a click, and it's, but I will say, I also agree though, on the other side of when things don't make sense in a crazy situation like that, like little things to me, like the first thing before even knowing a lot of the stuff that I keep saying Ryan's name, but that's just who I was listening to at the time. Right. But, like little things before you even know a lot of details of, let's just go with the restaurant thing of the mask. So the second you can sit down, you can take it off, but you walk in with it on. They've never been used before. Like little things like that of like, well, this doesn't really make sense. So then what is where's the questioning of even that? Like if it doesn't make sense, I totally agree with what you're saying there. It's just like, what do we, let's have a little, like, is this is what it seems like? Can we can question stuff, it's like,
Well,
I
people
don't
are
know.
so good at justifying their decision making because
Mhm.
when the Fauci video came out of him talking about masks not working and how
Yeah.
it just more of a psychological like benefit, like it makes you feel safer. Like I'm like, here's the evidence that he doesn't even believe the bullshit that's coming out. And it's like they're like, well, they just don't want people to buy all the masks up or whatever, whatever bullshit they came up with. I'm like, I'm just like, this doesn't make sense. And guess why it doesn't make sense? Because they're lying. I'm like,
Hmm.
when you catch somebody in a lie, how do you typically catch somebody in a lie? Like their stories don't make sense, right? Like that's what we're doing in real time. We're finding out that he's lying about something, and you're literally trying to justify his actions. And it's like he's caught. Like he said this. It's just like that old Fauci video of him talking about when somebody asked him about the flu vaccine and like, hey, my daughter or my son had the flu for like 5 days really bad. Do you think there's still any benefit in getting the flu vaccine? And there's a recording of him saying, he's like, no, he's like, because he's like, if he truly had the flu, if he tested for flu and
Yeah.
he truly had the flu, he's like, he has the best immunity you
Hmm.
could possibly have. And then all of a sudden, that went out the window. It's like, no, they're lying. It doesn't make sense because they're lying. Like when people would say, hey, a mask doesn't work because you would see the video of like the guy who would puff smoke and it go right through the mask. And like, the particles of the virus are smaller, then it didn't make sense because it was compliance. It wasn't about anything else. They just wanted you to comply. It wasn't about science. So it's like none of this stuff made sense. I would go to the gym and people would freak out about the mask, if anybody had their masks down or whatever. And I'm like, you guys are going around spraying everything the one thing nobody's spraying and everybody's waiting in line to grab is that spray nozzle. And I'm like, so guess what? We're still sharing, germs. And people would spray like the machines, but the dumbbells people just grab and put them back. I'm like, nobody's spraying the dumb. I'm like, you can't avoid spreading of germs. I'm like, and it's the way we've lived forever. It's like, you go anywhere, it's like, I don't know if this table's been clean, when I go to a restaurant or a bar, but I put my hands on there, right? And if I sneeze, I put my hand on my face, and it's like, it just germs, there's always a spreading of germs, and it's actually good for you to exercise your immune system from time to time and get exposed to that. So it's just like so much of it made no sense. Prior to 2019, were there any conspiracies or like rabbit holes that intrigued you, or that you possibly went down prior to really like fully going down and being I guess awakened, for a better term?
There'd be like topics I'd hear. I never dove super deep. I'd like, read a few articles here and there and be like, oh, that's interesting. But it never like sparked my, I don't know why the Epstein, I think it was just such an unraveling of different things that really kind of opened it. And then as soon as 2020 happens, and it's like, well, wait, this just seems very psyopy on top of what I just, saw of all this cover up of like just unraveling. Cause I grew up with, well, I won't go off topic, but what you're saying is, I'd say the Vegas one was one, the Vegas shooting. That was a big one. 9/11 at the time. No, I was in high school. I was a freshman or sophomore in high school. And I remember I was talking to someone the other day about it. It's kind of funny. You kind of like we're saying, you're kind of trying to justify what's happening as you're seeing it, and they'd have it on the TVs in school. And I remember all of us were saying, we're like, hey, like, oh, they must be blowing these buildings up so they don't like fall on another building, because everyone's like, oh, those are yeah, they're blowing that up right now, so it doesn't like and then you just go to a little further and no one's like, no, there was no explosives, they didn't self detonate, right? But that was like everyone's like innocent honest reaction in my group, of like my whole class was like, oh yeah, I think even the teacher was like, yeah, look at those are explosions coming out. They must have put some stuff in there to try to keep it safe from, like they do in Vegas, right? It goes straight down so it doesn't collapse on other buildings and things like that. And so that's kind of funny to rationalize that. Prior to that, I'm trying to think of any others. Not a ton, honestly. It would just be more, I was just the type of person who would just be, if everyone was doing one thing because they thought it was cool or something, I just would instantly go the opposite way. It was just intentional nonconformist. Or if this was the main song or movie, I'd be like, oh, I'll go listen to something. I don't want it to be on the radio yet. I'd rather listen to something new. Or that was kind of my extension of that at the time. So not a ton. I do remember even, I think it was 2018 or 2019 at a Blazer game, because we used to have tickets to every game. And I took my daughter, and like there was this big freak out on the news about someone had the measles, and there was this big measles thing, right? And I know at that time she had already, because they pump them with God, how many jabs when they're like, by the time they're a year, it's insane, right? And this is where the logic, if you're really going to believe in the vaccines, right, and believe they work, that logic went out the window, obviously in 2020, because even back then it was like, well, if your kid has the immunization, shouldn't you not care about that then? Like you shouldn't care, right? If that's what it's there to protect you for, like why is everyone freaking out? And then if you just run through it and your immune system will take care of itself. But it was kind of a funny pre-scare they were trying to do back then. I wasn't, that was my initial thought. I was like, well, if everyone has it, I guess you shouldn't be concerned with it then, right? If that's what you really believe in. But that went out the window for, all the other stuff. And I even remember when my son was born, all their protocol went out the window. That was in April 2020. So it's still early, but all the mask stuff went out because he had his cord wrapped around his leg about 2 or 3 times. So they had no choice at that time to do a C-section. They tried, and the midwife and the doctor in there were like, they were having an argument trying to figure out what to do. And one wanted the other way, one wanted the other way. They figured it out. I remember the nurse looking at me like, this is awkward. and they like, all that protocol went out the window when they had to go do stuff, and put them on like a CPAP for a long time. I was just standing there with them. All these doctors came in. They took off all their masks and everything. Like everything just took off. Like there was no thing. They weren't even requiring it for us at the time. Like as crazy as Oregon got. I think everyone was just like in that ward. They were just kind of concerned about, which is a good thing, like what's the actual issue here? Let's make sure the kid's healthy. But I thought that was kind of, funny how those things played out there. it was just so much hypocrisy back and forth, and no real, yeah, just the blind following of this stuff. It just, I mean, even the early studies. I know not everyone would get that on the main news, right? So again, if you don't know, I guess you don't know, but those early trials they were showing. I mean, that was all. I was just listening to that, so I get it. I was in that realm of knowing that stuff. So I think that, not to drag on or get off topic, but I think that is a good thing when we go back to like all of these shows to even expose, even if it's something. I know it's more about. You know, I still don't want to ignore COVID and all that because it was such a huge thing of in my life, and I mean, it was one thing like you said that affected everybody. You couldn't escape it, right? Where a lot of these can kind of be, I think that's why you can ignore a lot of stuff in the Middle East or stuff because it's not directly affecting you, right? It's still bad and it's terrible, right? It's none of that's good. But it's not, if it's not directly affecting you, you can, it's easier to ignore, right? Sometimes, or brush off or be like, or forget about it. When it's every day in your face and your kids, like that can really get, hit a chord. And that's something I don't want to give up. But again, sorry, I'm dragging on with the to really get these things out there, even like little nuggets here and there to get people, maybe then they will know before just blindly accepting things. Maybe they'll start to question things a little more. The more little things can get exposed, even if it's little pieces at a time,
What day in April was your son born?
The 13th. He also came a month and a half early, like my daughter. My daughter wasn't supposed to be till almost February. That was a shocker. But he was good. It was just the cord thing, like as far as weight and everything. She was just super tiny. But yeah, April 13th is when he was born.
Yeah, I'm April 19th. So
Oh, that's my grandfather's birthday. He was still alive at the time. He was 100. He turned 100 that year. He has his own crazy story of prisoner of war camp, and he saw the atomic bomb. He was in Japanese prison camp for 3.5 years. Wrote a book on that. It's pretty interesting. And that was one thing that kind of bugged me because they moved into the central part of our state. That's a decently sized state, so about 3 hours away, and where my parents lived when they retired, and we'd try to go visit them all the time as much as we could. And during that time, they wouldn't allow anyone. And that, like my dad and his sister would see him every single day, go see him because he was an outdoor ranch guy, always busy. And even in the home, obviously he couldn't keep as busy. But once you took that social aspect away from people, like they just crumbled. And I know he's 100, so I'm not trying to say, like you're 100, you don't have that much longer, but you could see his health decline instantly when you take away that, like, that's like all they have left is, some kind of, and to treat him like the way they did in those homes too, to go the opposite side of the old people. I mean, it was crazy. We got to, we had to go up to like the window and open the window. I mean, they didn't have masks or anything like that, but we were able to bring obviously seen our granddaughter his granddaughter many times, but he hadn't seen his grandson yet. So we brought him multiple times to go see. And yeah, we had to like open all of his windows so we could go there because they wouldn't let us in. We snuck around the back and he was like, he'd sneak to the window. But yeah, you could just see that. Like that was really, I don't know, demoralizing to see that kind of like, that's how they got to go out at this point. Like, I don't know. That was kind of not fun. I know a lot of people had it worse, so I'm not going to act like it's a, what was me type thing. But yeah, like that was so I always remember the 19th because that was my grandpa's birthday.
yeah, but you know what? These stories are important to share because
Mhm.
you have to be reminded of the nonsense. And like I keep saying on the show, it's like trauma that you lock away in your subconscious and you don't want to revisit over and over again. But I'm like, you need to revisit it because we need to be reminded like how chaotic it was, how crazy it was, all the things like you said that made no sense. Just how many people's mental health just was diminished by the lack of communication with friends and family, and how many people lost friends and family that they couldn't go see. I lost a cousin of mine in 2020. He was petrified of COVID, and he owned a butcher shop, and I would go in there and I'm like, dude, don't worry about it. It's bullshit. No. He's like, I don't know, man. He's like, I see nurses coming in here after work, and I'm worried that they're bringing COVID in. No. And then he eventually passed away. And I remember the first thing I thought was like, oh shit, what if it was COVID? And because again, like this was early, and I'm like, there was a little bit of self-doubt. I knew that this,
Mhm.
or I didn't know, but I had a hunch that this came from some lab in China. So I'm like, it could be maybe more dangerous than I thought. and then come to find out, he had some heart issues that he was basically uh kind of procrastinating going to the hospital because they told you like don't go to the hospital unless it's like serious. So he was having some heart pain and whatever, but didn't want to go to the hospital. So it's like one of those things, like, of course, we don't know, but it does lead to the question of like, what if he wasn't afraid of COVID, and what if he was willing to go and get looked at? Could have they caught something, found something and treated him earlier, and maybe he'd still be alive. So it just, there's tons of stories like that, and even today, like how many people have just mental health issues or whatever. Like I feel like the world's going fucking crazy in my opinion. Like I
Hmm.
feel like you're seeing more fights in sports. You're seeing more people like butt heads over things. Like I don't even the people who physically survived COVID in that whole era, like I don't think many people walked away unscathed, like I
Hmm.
mentally or physically, like I just, business wise, financially, like there's so many people that are just, still struggling. And how many of these kids in the long run are going to be, you know, really, really hurt by what they experienced. And, my kids still talk about playing soccer with masks on. My kids didn't have to because I had medical exemption forms. But they got harassed by all the other kids that would be like, why aren't you wearing a mask? And I know it
Hmm.
wasn't the kids' fault because the other kids were just curious, like why, but my kids always like they didn't like to stick out, or like everybody constantly asking, or sometimes they would have coaches that are like, why aren't you wearing a mask? And they would have to explain, oh, my talk to my, I would always say, go talk, tell them to come talk to me. And they would, but they didn't like being the center of attention, and then it stopped being fun, and my daughter ended up
It's
quitting soccer for a while. We had to like talk her into it eventually again. But yeah, like but I remember seeing parents at the grocery store, wherever, like if their kids had their masks down under their nose, screaming at them like, don't touch anything, put your mask, and it's like, and again, like it's like you said, if they don't know, you kind of feel bad for them because it's like, okay, they've been just going down this road of propaganda, and every corner is more propaganda, and they haven't been exposed, or they haven't been going against the grain like ourselves, who just naturally, for some reason, like to do so. So they just have always just done what they're told. And, in a way, there's almost a sense of sadness, and you almost feel bad for them because it's like they don't know, they've been tricked. And it's like that saying, it's easier to trick somebody than convince them they've been tricked, and it's really hard to get them out of it. And so yeah, it's I hate going back to it over and over again, because I don't, because I think it's important, but I'm always curious. I'm like, did the listeners get sick of hearing about it? Because during 2020, 2021, 2, 3, like literally every other episode was with a doctor, or Pfizer whistleblower, Brooke
Mhm.
Jackson, or Erin, I forget what her name was, the nurse whistleblower from the New York hospital.
Oh yeah.
It was just like all these whistleblowers and doctors and researchers. And I know, some people got COVID fatigue, but God, it's hard to not feel like we have to constantly be reminded, or if not, history will eventually repeat.
100%. Yeah, I think that's the biggest point of that. Of like, yeah, sometimes you don't want to drag on too long and people get fatigued, or they have short attention spans, as we know nowadays, and want to jump to the next thing. And the media does a good job of, especially the mainstream, of jumping to the next and kind of getting you moved past it. But yeah, it's like we don't want to forget because we don't want it to repeat. And I mean, it's not like I have a crystal ball. I don't know what their next plan is to do it again. I mean, if I was to guess, this is just me who knows nothing, but I would guess if they were going to try it again, they would wait until they had a form of digital ID first, or some sort of like real checkpoint to really regulate people. But you never know. I mean, I don't know. It could just be that worked out at the time. It was a situation they wanted to take advantage of. And but I do feel like, and this is just my experience, so it could be totally different for other people. This was one of those events and psyops that they did such a great job of. They always try to make it, in a world of not a lot of two choices or binary, it was really one or the other. It's like if you're on this team or that team, and they did a good job of making it very political, and then even flipping, with like pro-Trump vaccine to then anti-Trump vaccine to then pro-Biden vaccine to then people just stuck to their team and got scared. And once you had fear, they were very to where, like, let's say 9/11, right? As bad as that was, and obviously in a complete psyop, it's like maybe because it didn't affect us directly unless you were in New York or had relatives, like there wasn't as much division, other than you finally had some protests against the war, right? But it wasn't this like daily, like you can't even go in the grocery store without having someone scream at you or fighting you or yelling at your kids, or like it was everywhere. You couldn't escape it. And I think that was, whereas in a sense, 9/11 brought a lot of people together. And I'm not saying that's good because look at all the crap that's happened since, but there was a lot of like, let's get together and, very, pro America and all that stuff. So like people did kind of like, in a sense, in a good way, not in this was just like, let's tear each other's heads off and fight and just let the whole place crumble. And if you don't agree with my team, instead of being rational and trying to like, well, let's think about this. Like, I don't want this to ever happen again. So yeah, it's hard for me to let it go and ever like, definitely I can forgive people just with the situation and not knowing things, but I don't ever want to forget it or let my kids. I mean, I'm glad they didn't get exposed to so much of that junk, I got really fortunate just at the right time for their age, but I'm not going to let them. They need to know about it so this doesn't happen in their lifetime again. Or if it does, they're aware of it and can act accordingly, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah, without a doubt. But isn't it concerning that some people who even like eventually saw the lies that was COVID seem to be easily tricked again, right? Like just falling back in the same patterns of thinking. Like when the Epstein thing came out, it was the same thing. I'm like, this is one of those conspiracies. I've had Nick Bryan on years ago, talk about the Franklin scandal, and Jeffrey Epstein's name would always come up anytime you talk about pedophilia or child trafficking. And, this stuff would be spoken about in the alternative media community, but you bring it up at dinner time or at a party or a social gathering, people would look at you like you're crazy. And once it became a household name, and I honestly never thought that Jeffrey Epstein would be a household name and you'd have mainstream publications talking about him. But when it did, and they're openly talking about the connections with all these people, and I'm just like, well, now everybody is going to be at the same level that I'm at. Like I got to the point where I uncovered so many things, and there were so many weird things that you thought couldn't be true that end up having truth to, that I've gotten to the point where there's absolutely nothing that's too crazy for me to at least entertain. And I assumed everybody else would have the same personal experience. And they didn't. Like they were just like, oh yeah, like now this is public knowledge. Like he's linked to all these people. He's possibly having, underage kids around and blackmailing people and filming them and whatever. And then you bring up the next thing and they're like, no, that can't be true. It's like literally one of the darkest, craziest conspiracies just became mainstream. Like you had a guy who had an island, in the Virgin Islands, like a pedo island, and all the top people in science and fashion and music and politics and investments have all hung out with this guy and been seen with this guy. And you had the royal family. You had like he's linked to the CIA. He's linked to Mossad. He's linked to like what you couldn't write a better fictional conspiracy, and yet like the next one you think couldn't be true. I was talking to somebody. I'm like, hey, have you? Because it's somebody who likes to keep up with the royal family bullshit, celebrity news, and I'm just like, hey, that Kate Middleton's picture is pretty interesting because I'm like, she has disappeared, and they openly said that was a Photoshop picture. I don't know if you know, but like she hasn't been seen for like months, and they just they released a picture not too long ago that was like analyzed and quite obvious photoshopped or AI generated, and then they actually had to like take it down and say, oh, my apologies or whatever. But I'm like, there's some rumors that she was having an affair with her ex-boyfriend who ended up dying, and they found him dead, and she's gone missing, and like there's one picture of her in a car, but she doesn't have a mole. So I'm like, maybe they took her out like Princess Diana, and they're like, you really think they would do that? And I'm like, they did it to Princess Diana. I'm like, they literally like there's the boyfriend she had, the Middle Eastern boyfriend. I don't know if you know the story, but like he his family was super rich and put together a investigation and a documentary, and I wish I remember the name of the documentary. Maybe I'll look it up while we're talking, but it was a really good documentary, which was banned in the UK, by the way. They didn't let you watch it or see it or access it in the UK, but it connects all the dots that she had. She basically even had a letter. I mean, there's people even mainstream like Pierce Morgan. There's videos of him saying he's like, yeah, he believes she was murdered because she was dating a Middle Eastern, and there's rumors that like, hey, you couldn't have him in the bloodline because the bloodline can't be Middle Eastern and all this, so there's all this weirdness to it. So I'm like, and they're linked to Epstein, and they're not just like linked like they flew on a plane. Like they're coming out of, he got caught coming out of his apartment, like
Oh, yeah.
it's like it's pretty obvious, and they're all weird. Like
Mm,
they all have like sketchy pasts, and if you go back, like they're linked to the Nazi Germany and all this stuff. They all have like German last names and all. So it's like it's a lot of weird shit, and so it's like when somebody says, "Well, that can't be," they wouldn't know. I'm like, why wouldn't they? Like why? Like where do you draw the line of like that's too crazy to believe when there's already been so many things that have been exposed to be real?
100%. Yeah, it's like yeah, to not even expect. I did see the photo of her, but I didn't know she was missing that long. I didn't know the context of that. That's pretty insane. Yeah, it looked very AI with her fingers on that photo. Yeah, the Princess Diana thing. It's like that's a pretty well known. Like how long ago? I was pretty young at the time, so I didn't. But following up on that later, I know exactly what you're talking about with not the documentary. That sounds really interesting. But yeah, how would of all the history of what's gone on, just yeah, let's just say the royals and everything that's gone on there, you wouldn't question that, one bit. I mean, there's so much of this stuff to where, um, God, it'd be fun if they could actually have like a real. I don't know if it's just people that are stuck on too much mainstream. I mean, that there is a benefit of that. Um,
This,
Less people watching. Oh, there it is. Unlawful killing. Okay.
I bet you we could probably find it somewhere on like YouTube or Rumble or somebody's, put it somewhere. But
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
Pierce Morgan was in it, and he like openly said because she had a suicide letter. She similar to Danny Castellero and Gary Webb and all the people who have mysterious
Mhm.
deaths. The Boeing was
Boeing guy.
the recent story. And it was funny because I was just talking to my wife about that. I'm like, have you heard about the Boeing whistleblower story? And she's like, aren't we flying to Florida in 2 weeks? Maybe we should talk about this. I'm like, good point. But I'm like, this just all these people have mysterious deaths. I will say, I was talking to a friend of mine today about the Octopus, the Danny Castellero Netflix
Mhm.
document. Have you watched it yet, the series?
I haven't. No.
It's not bad. I will say they actually cover more than I thought they would cover.
Okay.
A lot of these Epstein documentaries really just focus on the victims, and which
Mhm.
is obviously they're important stories, and obviously I sympathize with them, but it doesn't expose anybody.
Mhm.
It doesn't it's like, well, if there's victims, then who were the people who made them victims? Like,
Yes.
if everybody keeps saying child trafficking and this and that and human trafficking or whatever, who are the people involved in this? Like, that's the thing that drives me nuts. I'm still stunned that there's not a good Epstein documentary out yet. Like, people have
Mhm.
asked me, and I'm like, I'm not sure. Do you know of one? I don't know.
No.
Yeah.
I'm in the same boat. Everything I've even seen or glanced or people give me word of mouth, it's the same thing. Yeah, and not that the victims aren't important, but you're 100% right. Like, where is this coming from? Why aren't we talking about the actual people? I mean, I know why, but also like, can we get one of those out, even if it's on like a secondary platform or like there's got to be something. I mean, Whitney's those books were awesome. Um, Good reads. I mean, thorough and detail, but that'd be obviously kind of hard to make a full documentary on that. But to that extent of detail. But yeah, we need something like that because it's just yeah, it is funny how there's nothing about the actual source of it or even anyone involved. I mean, even with Ghislaine, it's like yeah, as the running joke of it is, not one name's going to get released, so no one connected with us who should be associated and also should be sued and tried, allegedly, or at least it's like, no, we'll just shake that off. And it's I mean, it's a joke, and I don't mean to laugh because it is serious, but it is kind of like, in a macabre way, like it's kind of ridiculously funny about how obvious, they kind of just blow it off like they did before him. I mean, with his, how he was just having open day prison in Florida when he was there, and he could just come and go. And I mean, that wasn't on the news, and I didn't know that back then, but it's like, well, they kind of let these things happen.
Yeah, and Bill Gates lying about,
Oh yeah.
that he knew him and how often they hung out. And I feel like those type of guys are like the easiest to blackmail, because you think about it, if you're Bill Gates, you're like, a bookworm or computer nerd or whatnot, or you're one of these science guys, or Alan Dershowitz, another not very handsome looking guy. And all of a sudden, girls that are way out of your league are all over the place. Like, I feel like they'd be really those guys would be way easier to accidentally let their desires get the best of them and do something, and blackmail them than the average, more confident guy that's like, no, I'm not going to do this. She might be underage. She looks young or whatever. I can get women. I don't need this, So it's like, to me, it's like, it seemed pretty obvious. I'm like, of course, if Bill Gates was hanging out with him and he was around and Epstein was around beautiful women all the time, I'm like, oh yeah. I'm like, there's definitely something going on there. So, but even the Franklin scandal, you can find the Conspiracy of Silence documentary, which was
Well, that's true. Yeah.
yeah, so which was, pretty good. Only it's in like crappy, I think it's like standard definition or whatever there was VHS definition. But it was never released. And for people who don't know, I'm sure they do. But they've heard me talk about it before. But it was a Discovery Channel documentary, and at the last second they didn't release it, and then some unedited version of it ended up circulating on the internet. But with the Epstein thing, yeah, there's not really any good documentaries that really go deep into the stories. There's obviously a lot of good researchers out there, like Nick Bryan and Whitney Webb, who have done a lot of stories on Epstein. But there's not a good documentary. I'm sure eventually, hopefully, a somebody like a James Corbett, who does amazing documentaries, will focus on him for a episode. But it's amazing because he's been around for a long time, and it became such a mainstream story. You figure there would be a demand for it, right? Somebody would just jump on board just because, hey, there's a demand for it. But yet there isn't one. The Danny Casolaro one, I'm still stunned that they Netflix would promote, push, and release a story like that, because that's another one of those crazy stories that there's so many mysterious deaths linked to it, so many mysterious characters. It's linked to the Department of Justice. It's linked to the CIA. It's linked to, like, there's so many links to the octopus, and it goes in so many different directions, and it's so provable. Like, there's a lot, like, all these people are real people, and these stories are real stories, and there's a lot of digging you can do to really find that there's a lot of substance to what was being looked into and reported. And yet I'm kind of stunned that they let them kind of release it. But I don't know if it's like a JFK assassination thing where it's like it was so long ago, people just feel like, oh, those people are gone and forgotten, or they're not the ones running the show anymore.
Exactly. I could see that. That would make sense.
Are you familiar with the Danny Casolaro story?
Not in super in depth on it, but I'm very intrigued to check how this one came out and their point of view on that.
Crazy because it's linked to so many different different organizations and people, and it's organized crime, the mob, CIA, Iran, Contras, the Promise Software, Inslaw. Like, it's just like there's so many crazy people, crazy characters. And the crazy thing about the documentary is the kid who gets obsessed, the journalist who gets obsessed with uncovering what Danny Casolaro was looking into, looks like Danny Casolaro.
Oh, really?
He looks like him. Like, it's like, it's so, and his story is like parallel to Danny Casolaro, where he's like, wasn't a journalist per se, and ends up uncovering this story and becomes obsessed with it. And so it's pretty fascinating. I'm glad, because he was one of those, like, a lot of people knew Gary Webb, and his name would circulate. Obviously Kill Messenger was about the Gary Webb story. American Made was the one with Tom Cruise. like that was linked to the Gary Webb story. So the Rick Ross story is linked to the Gary Webb story. So there's a lot of people who knew of Gary Webb, but I'm like, Danny Castellero was one of those heroes that people just didn't know too much about. So I'm kind of glad that they did a documentary. But I'm always curious on why it's okay sometimes to like talk about things, and like when does it become okay to make a special on it, that exposes some people. And I don't you just figured like Netflix is pretty mainstream, and back in the day they used to have a lot of controversial documentaries on there, but now they've like kind of eliminated all that. So anytime they have anything that seems somewhat interesting, I'm kind of curious. I'm like, why do they let this thing be made? Why are they okay with this being on their platform?
I always wonder that myself too, and even YouTube to a certain degree. Of most of my very first show. I mean, granted, I've only been doing this, a year, so it's only been a full. But like my very first episode, I mean, it was probably my own fault, and I knew going into it. I only did YouTube to taking Ryan's theory of just throwing as many things out there, and YouTube is one of those things like we talk about. It's more of a mainstream, so people can see it. That'd be a good thing to see. Whereas like someone on Odyssey is probably kind of already somewhat down that road, right? But my first one and the very first clip was Ryan with a follow-up interview with McCullough and Dr. McCullough. So it was taken down as it was uploading. It wasn't even fully uploaded, and it was I got a strike immediately taken down. But that first year I had quite a few, not to the point where they banned me, because it would be like some they wouldn't pick up, some they would. But this last year it was a lot, almost the same stuff they would allow, which I thought was very interesting when it comes to like COVID stuff, which I thought was very. Now the last week I actually did, I think it was Miriam's section. They took her down pretty quick on my section. At least that's what they said the section one was, and it was talking about COVID and the spraying. But so they wouldn't tell me exactly. They just say medical misinformation. But that's the first one I've had in almost in that calendar since then, which I thought was kind of funny, of how it's kind of changed. Even what's their algorithm to be like, is this acceptable now all of a sudden, to where okay, now is when we block everything, right? It's interesting how that goes down. I always wonder how that works.
Yeah, and and it gets people in trouble because there's certain things you can't talk about that eventually you can talk about, and then eventually they'll make it not, acceptable again. So it's like you'll have old videos that were
Yeah.
acceptable that can be taken down. I mean, the January 6th thing, all the conservatives that were saying that the election was stolen, like all those people were being censored. And now it's like acceptable for like more mainstream people talking about it, a Candace Owens, a PBD or whatever, like they talk about it, and it seems like, okay, they're not getting flagged. It's okay for them to talk about it. Even certain things with COVID now are more acceptable to talk about, but it's like that it can switch so quickly. And because they make their own guidelines, and there's nobody accountable for, even if they are just harassing somebody who even stayed within their guidelines, they kind of do what they want. And with the election coming around the corner, I am curious on like what they're going to ban, and what, if they're going to, because we saw with COVID where like, okay, now they had a serious reason to really clamp the lid on any, conflicting opinions, and just kind of force feeding the mainstream narratives, which is crazy because forever YouTube was created to get alternative entertainment and media. And now you go on YouTube, you put in any news story, anything, and the first things that come up are all mainstream publications, and CNN clip, Fox clip. It's like, no, I'm on YouTube to get alternative perspectives, not the mainstream perspectives. So, but I definitely feel like, this is like the beginning of a long road to the election. There's going to be a lot of craziness, a lot. I think even COVID was, it was prolonged for the reason of the election. I think most people would agree with that. All the mail-in balloting, the mail-in ballots, like I think that was a big reason to why they're constantly fear mongering and scaring people, because they wanted to kind of justify not going out and voting. And not that voting was going to make a difference, but my point is like, there's no lengths they won't go to win an election, even if that means lying and scaring people and whatnot. So I'm kind of curious on what's going to happen this upcoming election. And I remember also the tension in the country. And you living in Oregon, I'm sure you sensed it. Like just like there was just energy, like conflict energy and like negative energy everywhere. Like everybody seemed really edgy and like at any moment could like just lose it. I mean, living in Oregon, especially with like the protests and all that stuff, did you sense that? And how much of that did you experience in your own personal life?
Yeah. We weren't downtown a lot. Our business is just outside, but we used to go downtown a lot for if our suppliers out of state we couldn't get, and it was a good last second I drive downtown to get it. And it's like, Portland's not that big. I mean, it's not a tiny city, but obviously it's not a major, huge one. But it was we didn't get a lot of the necessarily the protester that I really kind of so much was just shut down that like I would go to work, the freeway, it was kind of nice in a sense. Like I'm not gonna lie, like the freeways were empty. It was kind of nice to like get to work in 20 minutes or so. Um, and then not a lot of people walking around. Obviously not great for business, but um, didn't go downtown a lot. Like there's no sports going on. That stunk. Like there goes, tickets to Blazer games and things like that. And then the town I live in, I people want to call it a rural town, but it's just a suburb, about 20 minutes south. And it has like a farm edge to it. So there is a farming community. So I would say there is kind of like there was a little bit of different feel there, like half one way, half the other. Um, so what we did personally was we didn't want to put up like, and I'm not saying it was bad for other people to do it. I was just trying to look out for our own employees, and like I didn't want to cause so much of a scene that people come attacking our place, and put like, if you wear a mask, I'm gonna kick you out. I said, do what you want, basically, and said, we're just going to take everything down and we're just going to act normal. There's no signs making it. There's no signs not making it, if that makes sense. Just, just treat it normal. Let's just be open. Let's accept people in. Yeah, we'll have a couple people maybe yell at us. It really was, honestly, we had more people say like, oh, I don't have to wear this than we did yelling at us, because I think once they kind of got in and realized it was an accepting environment, then like a hostile grocery store or the few places that were open, it was nicer. And the few business owners I know, they all owned restaurants, so they were really hit, with the open, and then they cut close, and then they could do takeout only. It was just so crazy for them. A lot of the ones I talked about kind of said the same thing. I was like, I know we have totally different types of businesses, but you could try it and just like stick together, and that worked. They just took everything down and just acted normal, and I'm sure they still got immensely hurt, but that kind of seemed to work, and it helped bring a few more people together and kind of like just forget about what the heck was going on. I mean, it was the mask thing here, honestly, was like my wife works, for orthopedic place, and up until last May, they were still making anyone in the medical field wear a mask up until last May 2023 in Oregon. Like even a California dropped theirs in Washington, and like those three states usually kind of align with each other, not even just politically, but like a lot of times when big things happen, they like to stick together. And yeah, we were the last one, and it was just like still would blow my mind. Like not even a full year ago, they were still doing that here. And I still see here, depending on the area. I mean, Oregon's another one of those. I think a lot of states, right? You have like a big metro area, and the rest of Oregon's pretty rural, honestly. Like you have Central Oregon's high desert, you got the valley, you get to just a few pockets. So there is a very diverse, section of that, of different types of people. But to this day, I'll still see in our area, like mass driving by themselves, Tesla, Ukraine flag, the whole like kind of like a running joke, but it's like actually what you see. And I'm glad I see it less now, but I mean I still see the effects of some people just still kind of like brainwashing that, sadly. I going back to, I still feel bad for some of that. Like it's just they really got people to divide. And like you're saying, going into this election year, I think that's another good thing to like, let's get back on splitting people back up, and having people fight each other, and it makes it easier to control and slip things in and do crazy stuff because they're so distracted.
Now, living in Massachusetts and being a parent and seeing what my kids had to go through, and it definitely made me contemplate leaving a lot. And I remember even talking to my wife, like, "Hey, how can we afford to stay in Florida?" Like, we would go visit, and I'm like, "Everybody's normal down here. People are living normal." I'm like, it's just a completely different energy. and then you would come back to Massachusetts, and it's almost like you sense the tension again, and you're like, oh my God. Uh, was your experience similar? Did you contemplate leaving?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Especially with our kids being younger, it's like they're not attached. And I mean, my wife and I won't get too deep, but like we have totally different backgrounds in the sense of like I moved all the time as a kid because actually my dad did work for the government. So we moved all the time. So I was used to it. I've lived in the East Coast, Midwest, you name it. I've moved all over. So to me, it's not that big of a deal, but I get where she comes from. That's very large family, always lived here, never moved. It's a different kind of, small community. It's harder to just pick your stuff up. But even her was like, I don't know, this is getting so insane here and so uncomfortable. Um, and just you add a bunch of things you normally complain about, and then you add all of that the restrictions and the yelling and the harassment, and it's just like, man, is it even worth it at this point? Like, and I didn't get to travel a ton, but I went to, my sister lives in Oklahoma, not really by choice. That's just where her husband lives. Like, obviously it's not the most ideal, but as far as that went though, and super friendly. I flew through Denver and went there, and talking to so many of those people, and this was like in the midst, this is 2021. I flew there to get they had a puppy for my mother-in-law. So we went to pick that up. I wasn't there long. It was like nothing had happened. I asked so many people, like, yeah, we had about 10, 15 days of like shutdown, and then we just went right back. There was nothing. It was like, they didn't even remember it. It was just normal life. I mean, I know Denver can be this way, but it's the airport. But even the airport in Denver was not anything like the Portland one. And I was just like, man, this is like two different worlds of like, it's funny to me that, and you could even say that with parts of Oregon, you get over a certain area, it was just like, yeah, it didn't exist. But then you have these little bubbles of, yeah, it was, I did experience the kind of mix of, I mean, we still think about it every now and then. It would be a lot, but now with like the way houses are, I'm like, I'm going to wait until everything's just out of control with housing and prices and interest rates. And we were actually honestly planning on moving within Oregon in 2020. We were like planning for it. We have like, had a small starter house, and we're like, I think spring of 2020 will be a good time to upgrade our house. Little did we know, everything was going to go to crap. So yeah, I do still even contemplate it, just seeing how things go. I hate being like running away from things, too. I'd like to be able to say I could sit and deal with it, but like what you were saying, like I think it would have been even a more different story how much I more would have reflected if it was like really affecting my kids yet at that point. Like that would have really, and that's the same with my wife. Like once it, like I can't even imagine that with you. Like once it hits your kids, I don't know. That's just like a whole new level of like personal stuff. I can deal with stuff against me, and even to a certain degree with my wife, because we can stick together, you still take more of offense to that. But me, of course, I can take whatever. But yeah, your kids, it's like, I don't know. That's where I might have contemplated a whole lot more if it was really, affecting that. And I get why people did. Like, I'm not going to hate on anyone who did move. Like, I get it.
Yeah, there's a nerve that's hit when your kids are being harmed, physically or mentally, and it just it brings out a fire. I mean, I remember when I, first going down these rabbit holes, I'm just like, oh, all the anti-GMO, anti-Monsanto people are moms who are concerned about their kids. Like they weren't concerned about themselves, like when they were eating this crap. But once they had kids and they did some research, same thing with like the anti-vax community and all this stuff. It was like, it was parents who were just motivated by protecting their children. And so I absolutely agree. It brings out another level of just motivation and perspective. And like our one job is to protect our kids, and when you feel like you can't do it or you're being prevented from doing so, it hurts and it sucks, and it's just I remember when the time the mask, I think the kids went to school. I do remember my kids going to school for a little bit with a mask before we end up homeschooling them, and it was just it broke my heart. And I would always tell the kids, I'm like, don't wear it on your nose, just wear it on your chin. I'm like, and whatever. I'm like, if you drop it or whatever, get another one. And it just, I didn't want them wearing dirty masks on their face, but like my kids are such good kids that they just didn't want to get in trouble. I knew that they were wearing it normal, even though I told them not to, and and it would break my heart. And that's why we ended up like, you know what? Fuck it, we're homeschooling. And Even though my wife's like, I can't homeschool, and I'm like, listen, I'm like, school got in the way of my learning, so I'm like, they'll learn just from being around us and socializing and regardless, like, what good is it if they're learning at school if they're coming out with a bunch of fucking trauma, and I remember like the first time my wife's like, oh, but they want to go back to school. I'm like, because they want to go back to what they remember school was. But what school is now, what they'll be going back to is prison, where everybody goes in line, nobody touches each other, nobody, everybody's panicking. And I'm like, in that sense of nervousness, of getting sick and touching things and sneezing and whatever, I'm like, they're going to sense that and it's not going to be a fun experience. So it's like they want to go back to school the way it was before, not the way it is now. And just this crazy people. I felt so guilty for the fact that I've been down all these rabbit holes, talking about geopolitical things, talking about all these issues going on in the world, scandals, whatever. And in my backyard, in our school board, we had a bunch of elected idiots who like were just the most dangerous people. I'm just like, you guys are fucking. I remember like the first time I had Dr. Peter McCullough on my show. I went to a school board meeting that night, and I just happened to be scheduled at that time, and I remember just going there. So I'm like, I remember telling them at the school board meeting, I'm like, I just had Dr. Peter McCullough on, one of the most published doctors in the U.S. I'm like, and I'm like, where's your PhD? Like, what do you know about? First of all, I'm looking at the school board members. I'm like, you guys don't know anything about health. Like, I just see a bunch of obese, pre-diabetic, diabetic people who are wearing masks, trying to tell me they know how to stay safe and how to protect the kids for their health. I'm like, you guys don't even protect yourself. You don't even take care of yourself. Don't all of a sudden become an expert. That was the part that used to drive me nuts. Like before 2020. I've always been a gym rat. I love, exercising, playing sports. And people would come ask me about my advice all the time. And all of a sudden, people who didn't know shit about health or nutrition were telling me, like, that I was wrong about, like, germs or the virus or whatever. I'm like, what do you know about health? I'm like, you give your body exercise, sunlight, nutrition, and make sure your immune system is in a good place and your body's in a good place. When you get sick, you'll be fucking fine. I'm like, now don't tell me if you get vaccinated and you wear a mask, like that's going to protect you from the shitty lifestyle you live and all the lack of nutritional value you're getting from, the processed food you're eating. Like it was nonsense. It's like, it was such nonsense. It would used to, oh, I ruined some family get-togethers because of this stuff, just because people would say stuff and I'm just like, I can't help but like have to correct them because I would tell my wife, I'm like, if I don't say anything, this propaganda will continue to spread. I'm like, I will find a polite way to try to state my point that they're wrong and this isn't killing people and the case numbers completely inflated, and even if it's a case number, what the fuck is a case? There's plenty of people who tested positive and didn't even know they had it. So it's like when everybody's getting tested, like, yeah, there's going to be a lot of case numbers. Like, and I had Dr. Scott Jensen from Minnesota, who's a doctor and senator. He was a senator there, and he was auditing a bunch of deaths, and he's like, there's a bunch of people dying from car accidents and stabbings that are considered COVID deaths, and people are like, oh, that's not true. And, it's like, it was maddening. Like, it was just, I couldn't help but realize, like, oh my God, like when people are afraid, logic goes completely out the window. Like, I would get people who would say, well, I got the vaccine just to protect my husband who's older or my grandparents. And I'm like, wait. But the vaccine doesn't protect them. It only protects you. You can still get it and spread it. Yeah, but my doctor said, and I'm like, you were literally ignoring the point that I just made, which completely blows up your reasoning for getting the vaccine. And people would still repeat it. And I'm just like, you're making no sense. I'm like, you're not in danger if you believe this shit works. And you can't call me a murderer or whatever because I can get it and spread it just as easily as you can get it and spread it, even if you're vaccinated. So all of us unvaccinated are supposed to be dead. If we're such horrific people, like we're all supposed to be dead right now. You know, it's like that little meme that went around. Like, I don't know
Yeah.
anybody who regrets not getting the
Yeah.
vaccine.
And I 100% agree with that. I don't know anybody. I know a lot of people do regret it, whether they felt pressured, and I'm not going to hate on, but I know more people, including myself, that know people who got hurt by it than I do know anyone who got affected without taking anything. 100% on that, at least in my circle. Obviously, that's just, one thing. It is funny how, logic goes out the window with fear with these people. And it's funny, no one wants to talk about excess deaths the last few years now, right? We're not having a death counter now of higher death rates now that we have than we did during, that was all the talk in 2020, 21, and part of 22. But now I will forget about that, even though it's higher now than what they wanted. It's crazy. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. And so many double standards I'd see even on my wife's work with, like, half the time the doctors wouldn't even wear masks, but they'd make like other people do them, or they wouldn't, even talk about that kind of stuff. It was just like, so many things were so backwards, and it just, I don't know. I can understand, the frustration. I can only imagine a school board seeing those people with that. I even remember when my kids, and it sucked then. I wasn't able to go to the gym as much because they closed them, but I had luckily up to that time was trying to build a small one in my garage just because I was sick of, like, if I didn't have time, needless that I realized, like, my kids will interrupt me half the time and won't let me do it anyway, but at home. But I remember, so I hadn't been sick for the longest time. And I remember even when I first had my daughter, like, so many people, including my parents, you got to go get a flu shot. You got to get a flu shot. I was like, I've never had one. And I might have had the flu once in my whole life, and you got over it and it was fine. Sat on the couch for a few days. I was good. Not saying people obviously can, if you don't treat it right? But like with anything, but you see, in their realm, it was like he had to get one for his job every year, and he never got sick. So I was like, I get in your world, it worked for you, but look at my world. I never got sick either. And I remember my kids just, kids get sick, right? They get bugs that go around or whatever it is, and that's just part of building their immune system, right? Getting exposed to stuff and learning that. And my kids were, down in the weather, and my wife too. And they, at her work, they made them take tests. And at least she knew through me, is like, these don't work. The false positive rate, I was trying to explain to her the cycle threshold and all the issues with how it's blown out. And she's like, I know, I just have to show them one. I was like, well, you don't even have to, like, just make one up and take a picture. It was so ridiculous too. Anyone could have forged it, right? I was like, well, we're not having our kids do that. I'm not having them take a test. I'm not having them do all that stuff. If they want to just assume they have it, that's fine. And we just went in because they had a really lingering cough just to check it out at the time. And the lady was like, actually, so many people are saying it's COVID right now. And, like, actually what a lot of kids are having is just RSV. And I can't tell you how many cases of RSV I have, and everyone just keeps labeling it as COVID. And she was just flat out with it. She's just like, I was like, oh, and back then, anytime my kids are sick, they'd be crawling in our bed, hacking in my face, drooling all over me and stuff. And I was fine. I mean, they were literally 24/7 on top of me. Nothing happened to me. It was just, they passed through, had a few days. They didn't need anything. They were fine. And, like, life went on, it's like, and people are freaking out asking me. I was like one of the few only people in my circle. And it's like, how are you? I was like, it's fine. I mean, the only thing that sucks is I guess I can't travel certain times, but whatever, I'll figure out a way. Like, I was the only, like, there are people yelling at me. I can deal with that. I'm not a confrontational person, but it is what it is, I guess, in those situations. Wild times. It's for sure, to say the least.
And the obviously you said that you had, like, a sense of awakening during the whole COVID thing. Was your wife kind of on the same journey and path as you, or did
Yeah.
she take a little bit of work to kind of get her, or was she quick to also see through the BS?
Yes. So she's the type where she's not into politics at all, which is a good thing for me. I don't need, like, that stress in my life. And she's kind of like go with the flow. She'll always listen. I'm not saying she just only listens to me in that sense. Like, I'm not trying to, I don't want to make it sound like I'm diminishing her intelligence, but, like, she knows I'm looking into all this stuff where she's not, so she's like, she's like, what did you learn here? What did you learn there? And we talk about things. I'm like, well, I can explain, here's what's going on here, like the PCR test, for example, things like little things like this. And sometimes I think, she's like, okay, just shut up. Like, I get it. Like, I'd go off on these things, but she would, she would do, we got through a lot of stuff. I know it was tough at one point because like we were afraid she'd lose her job. So she had to take the first two. She didn't want to, but at the time, when I don't know what's going on with our business. I don't blame her. And now she's like, it's just, I don't want to do this, but she's like, I'll do it for me just so I can keep my job. And then needless to say, like a few months later, there was like at least 4 doctors that didn't. So that was neat, even though they told her all that, meds and med assistants had to, and everyone else. And so it was like, that was an experience. But other than that, yeah, we were on the same page. That's where we're, especially with the kids, and like, we're not going to throw masks on them. Like if there is the only way to get them through a certain checkpoint, then yeah, we'll do the thing on the chin if we have to, especially, but yeah, at least we got on the same page. It was still stressful, I'm sure. Like even when you're on the same page, when you're both getting hounded by stuff, and especially, our son, like we would just do our routine checkups, like when they're first born, they just check him, make sure he's growing okay. The first few, and just weigh him and check him. It wasn't even, and just trying to go through that was kind of annoying, like the whole, how much the hospitals had changed. And I was like, I'm so over all this. We don't need any of this stuff. And I think she's been able to see it more. And I think that's good too, because it's kind of opened her mind more to, yeah, this is kind of all baloney. We don't need any of this stuff. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, I mean, I guess I get if you broke your leg or something or snapped in a car accident, right? But other than that, it's like the whole system's just kind of rigged to like just get more money and insurance and copays. And it just, they're not really teaching you how to stay healthy. They just want to treat your symptoms, right? Like you want to keep you down, not tell you what's wrong with your diet. Why are you feeling this way? At one point I did go see a doctor on my side, near, just to keep at the time when I had insurance, just to keep my, guy. You had to see him once every 2 years. And he was actually really cool. During that time, even in Oregon, in that area, he was like, he didn't bring it up once on like, if I got my shot, didn't care about a mask. And he was, if anything was of my concern, health, but I obviously I can't work out as much as I used to. I used to play sports a lot more than I used to now. Kids kind of have slowed me down a little bit, but always been pretty active with a lot of things, as much as I can, with in the gym as much as I can, playing sports. And he would just be like, my biggest thing was probably I didn't know as much about having a better diet and eating things with less crap in it, and that was my help. I think a good things coming out of 2020 was like, let's focus on more like less crap food, even if our kids are picky, and for ourselves and for our kids, and really kind of, look at labels a lot more, try to buy local more. Even our meat we can get from local ranchers we know, and veggies from local markets and stuff like that. That's kind of nice to like, I'm happy to be in that world now of like getting away from so much of the GMO and the crap. And in that world, I still joke sometimes with so many people that do question the CDC, and rightfully so, but they don't question the USDA label on their stuff too, that says certain things. Where I know a lot of certain farmers that, even though it is organic, they'll spray the living crap out of it because they're told to, and they'll have one row right next to each other like this, and this one's not to spray and this one is, and it just overspray all over it, the runoff. And so I was able to, at least even oats wise, I don't eat a ton of oats, but that was one of the biggest ones. Like oatmeal, right? It has so much glyphosate. I mean, everything does, right? And there were even a couple brands we found where they had their own special that wasn't USDA labeled. It was like, they had their own glyphosate free label. And granted, I don't know the full testing, but they'll test these things. I learned that with dog food and a bunch of other stuff. It kind of got me down the nutrition side of stuff, which was kind of cool. Sorry, I got off on a way sidetrack of asking how my wife was in this, but
No, it's all right.
long story short, she's gone on that journey with me.
I do too much talking. It shows, so I'm glad that you take the lead from time to time. But there's a great app called oh, you probably can't see it, but it's called YUKA.
Okay.
Yoka, and you can just scan any label you want, and it tells you like, I don't use it that often because everything I eat is like just stuff I get from the butcher shop, and it's, so there's no label, so it's like typically just eggs that I get from my parents, or like meat that I get from the butcher shop. That's like 99% of what I eat.
Yeah.
And I only eat one meal a day, so it's definitely cheaper eating this way.
Oh yeah.
But you don't have to worry about finishing a meal and then already concerned about like, what am I going to eat for my next meal? But it's I use it for my kids because my kids sometimes will want snacks or whatever.
Mhm.
And so I'm like, okay, let's just see what's in it. And somebody recommended it to me. It's a pretty good app. It tells you, just if it's good, if it's bad, preservatives, all types of stuff on, in there. And especially for somebody who maybe struggles to read labels, like I've been reading labels for a long time. I'm like you. I'm a gym rat. I've been working out since a teenager, and it's been many years, kind of turning whatever I'm buying around to be like, okay, I know what the marketing says in the front, but what's really in this thing? It's like every pre-workout says like massive pump,
Oh yeah.
hardest muscles, all this stuff. I'm like, okay, great, but like what's actually in it, So it's like after a while you get kind of good at like knowing what should be in there, what shouldn't be in there and whatnot. But yeah, that's all like super important too. Like so many of our health issues are dietary, so much of our health issues are lifestyle choices and small changes can go a long way and some of it like we keep saying but it's true like some people I just feel bad for because they look at the food pyramid, they ate that way, they use toothpaste with fluoride because that's what their dentist and doctor told them to do. They just made all the wrong decisions because they were told to. And it's even with like parents that I know that vaccinate their children and then listen to a episode I do with whoever, Del Bigtree or Wakefield or whoever it may be. And they're like, oh, I feel bad, and I'm like, don't. You can only make decisions based on the information you had, and based on the information you had, I'm like, you made your decision. And honestly, you shouldn't be mad at yourself. You should be mad at the social media platforms, the news, all the media that's been lying to you that didn't give you access to, both sides of the argument and force fed you pharma propaganda. Like those are people you should be mad at. Don't be mad at yourself because, you really like I said, most people don't even know where to find this information, and they only make it harder and harder to find it. So if you attempt to search some of this stuff, it becomes really difficult. That's why I am kind of glad that Russell Brand and a Joe Rogan and whoever may be like now are having, some of these more fringe topics now become more mainstream and talking about, hey, so let's talk about the history of the vaccine courts and the VAR system and the science behind vaccines and all that stuff. Like even things like you said, like the rabies vaccine. Like, my parents always had a lot of animals, and it's fine. They're like, oh, we got to at least get the rabies shot. And I always thought, I'm like, do we? I'm like, well, how is it any different than any other disease that you get? Like, can you just like not have to get the shot, and can the shot also have adverse reactions like any other shot? And according to your experience, you can have adverse reactions.
Yeah. Yeah, and they concurred. They're like, yeah, that's exactly what happened. I mean, obviously they didn't test her, but yeah, they're like, yeah, we gave too many. We shouldn't have done that. Should have spaced them out, which who knows, it could have still, given her an issue. Could have just not agreed with her, right? As we know with a lot of adverse stuff. Yeah, it was I mean, she's fine now, but like at the time, I mean, who knows long term, right? But yeah, eyes in the back of her head. It was just like one seizure after the next. Never had any of that. She was probably like 3 or 4 at the time. It's not like she was an old dog. And yeah, like growing up around animals a lot too with horses and other ones, like you just see that was like so much norm. I was like, but is it like, do we really have to like so much of this? Is it, or is it just kind of programmed with the other stuff we talk about? That's why it's funny how we can see it one way, but not always the other. It's like a lot of times it's kind of just the same junk, different story.
Yeah, and we made it this far, eating things
Yeah, thank you.
we could
Yeah.
grow, things we could kill, and without a lot of this modern science. And there's always this myth. And Rogan just had whatever his name is, the futurist scientist guy on his podcast. I'm gonna have to look up his name. But he just I'm like, Rogan, please call him out on his bullshit. He's talking about how like we're gonna live longer because of technology and all this stuff. And back in the day, people used to live, this many years ago, people lived till they were 20 and this and that. And Rogan's like, didn't some people live till they're like 80 or 100, but it was more like the average age was based on birth deaths, a lot of pregnant women just kids just not surviving birth and whatnot. And he's like, no, no, that's not true. And I'm just like, yeah, that's bullshit. Like that
Oh,
was,
100%.
that aspect of it. My wife was similar to your wife, a similar experience where she wanted to have a regular birth and a vaginal birth, and then she couldn't, and because she pushed and pushed for hours and hours and had no luck, and luckily when they decided to have a C-section, they realized like he was stuck, he was never going to come out. And so luckily, like thanks to C-sections, like my son's alive, my
Yeah.
wife's alive, everybody survived. And so certain things like you said, like it's not all harmful and it's not all you know horrific, but so in a case of emergency or stuff like that, like there are some good things that come out of modern technology and science and medicine and whatnot. But everything's a business, right? And this is
Mhm.
this is like my love-hate relationship with like capitalism, right? Like people are always like, I'm pro-capitalism. And I'm like, what does that mean? I'm like, you're pro-capital. Like, isn't it just a way of having a economy? Why does it have to be like a religious thing? Like where like I like it becomes a philosophy that you are deeply in love with and you enforce and want, it's like there's also a lot of bad things that come out of capitalism, right? It's not all good. I'm not saying that like obviously government overreach forced us to wear masks and get vaccines and not not be able to travel and whatever. So that's dangerous, right? That's not
Mhm.
good. But it like capitalism is also why Pfizer was
Mhm.
force feeding bad information and telling the media to scare people so they can force feed their product. So it's like you can't only talk about the good of capitalism without talking about the bad of capitalism. Like I had Jason Bassler from the Free Thought
Yeah. Good
podcast. Oh, that's right. You clipped that. I now that
Yeah.
I remember you like
Oh, you're good. You're good.
yeah, and if you remember that conversation, like we had a little bit of a back and forth on that. He's like, "Oh,
Mhm.
it's like capitalism," and I'm like, "Yeah, but planned obsolescence, that's capitalism." Um, Nikolai Tesla not being a household name and his technology
Mhm.
not being used is capitalism. Like, there's a lot of things that are due to and I know I got listeners who are like, Ricky, you fucking idiot. Like, like I know there's going to be some people that are upset, but it's true. Like I haven't, and again, like I explore all philosophies and opinions and I adore the libertarian friends of mine.
Mhm.
Like they make very valid points. They make, maybe private companies will pave roads to their businesses and then let all the, but all the rest of us are fucked, so it's like, they will, maybe they will hire security, right? Like, but if that was the case, why aren't they doing it in New York,
Mhm.
or in California where there's crime everywhere, whatever? Like, just hire private security. Like, just hire, you know, it's because the government is saying you can, like they're not arresting people, so the public security is not doing, the job that they should be doing. So things are going irate, and then in a, anarcho-libertarian worldview, you would think like, okay, then why not have the private company hire security themselves to make their businesses safe? That could happen. But you know what also happens? They just move, and then the people who live
Mhm.
there are fucked without work. Just like well, I live in Massachusetts, right outside of Springfield. There's tons of factories in Springfield. Even in the little town that I live in, a lot of Polish and Portuguese immigrants moved here. I live like I can see the mills where my mother grew up working. My dad worked construction, still does, and my mother worked at these mills, and a lot of my family worked at these mills, and I can see them from my house. And now it's there's nothing there in many parts of the building, but the paper mills from Holyoke, Massachusetts, like there's like all these just empty buildings because capitalism said it's way cheaper to go to Mexico or it's way
Yeah.
cheaper to, buy stuff from China. So to me, it's not a honest, uh, debate if you're gonna ignore, right? And that's the part that like bothers me a little bit. Is like, okay, if we talk about it, like don't just poo-poo the point, the obvious. I mean, planned obsolescence. I brought up in that podcast like the light bulb conspiracy. That's documented. It's proven. Capitalism. and I think Jason said, oh, like I don't think he was aware of it because he's like, oh, capitalism is why we have light bulbs that last this long. It's like eventually there will be technology that's great, but if they can't profit from it, they will suppress some other technology to profit from it. They will, again, plan obsolescence. They will engineer something to fail, right? Everything right now is engineered to fail. Nothing.
Mhm.
You can go into an old person's house that still has a microwave that works, an old
Oh
TV
yeah.
that works, a old whatever fridge that works. Today, nobody has shit in their house that's more than more than 10 years old, right? Like everything falls apart, everything fails, everything, and it's engineered to. One of my best friends, Chris, he engineer by trade. He's worked for a bunch of different firms or whatever, and I remember talking to him about planned obsolescence, and he's like, yeah, he's like, without a doubt, he's like, when we're hired as a firm to help engineer something by a company, one of the first questions we ask, because this is not for evil reasons, this is just for budget reasons, like
Hmm.
how long do you need it to last? Because and then we can cheap out on certain materials. We can, it's like it's not, so it's like that is capitalism, like that,
Yeah.
so this idea that like, and I argue the fact, okay, and now I'm going on a long rant,
You're
but
good.
it wouldn't be an episode if I didn't. But I argue the fact that everybody was like, oh, but look how happy all this technology, look how awesome it is that we have phones and internet. And I'm like, and on the recent Joe Rogan podcast with this what the hell is his name? I know you know who he is if I look him up. But he was like, oh, like, would you want to go 10 year or 100 years back and live in that time, or would you rather live now? Where was he? Ray Kurzweil,
Mm.
and 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 he's like, oh, wouldn't you be way happier now with your phone and your internet? And it's like I argue like, well, you wouldn't be less happy back then because you'd be grateful for what you did have. And
Mhm.
honestly, I would argue what you did have and what your focus was on, which was like, a family and friends and community, would be a healthier and happier lifestyle than what we live today. So we have more shit, but we're not happier. People
Mhm.
are self-medicating with drugs. People are on depression, all this stuff. People are alcohol sales are always consistently good. Marijuana is consistently, good. I don't have anything against either one of those things. People do what they want. I think people have the right to live their life on, there's a limited amount of time we have on this earth. Live it however you want to live it. If you want to have a face tattoo and whatever, then and play really crazy music, go ahead. Guess what? I grew up in a metal scene. I
Mhm.
I was constantly I was the most normal looking person out of my group of friends. Like I was a metalhead. Like I hung out the skater kids, the industrial kids, the goth kids. But and then I also had friends in played basketball, friends that were in the cars. Like so I was in a lot of different, and I think like everybody had their own little culture and their own little style and whatever. And I think everybody has the right to, pursue whatever they want. But, you know, you we've been convinced and we've been sold this like lie that like all these things will make us happy. More ones and zeros, more. That's where like, where I have issue like the PBD podcast, right? I like
Mhm.
what Patrick Bet David's doing, but he's one of those like, hustlers where it's just like,
Yes.
and I don't like hustlers because
Mhm.
hustlers give me that salesman vibe of like, you're full of shit and you
Mhm.
only care about like I know people who celebrate hustlers. They're like, oh dude, he's a hustler. I'm like, what does that mean? Like, does that mean that like he will do anything for a buck? Because that's not what you're saying, but that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that like I don't I wouldn't even use the term hustle. Like, how about you? I'm just a hard worker. How about I
Mhm.
just like I'm trying to give some value back to the world? Like, how about now I'm going on a long rant. This you could tell this is one of
You're good.
many topics that work me up. But what's your thoughts on the 1,000 different things I just threw at you?
No, you're good. I struggle honestly with, even our business because I'm not, when I went to school, it was for just business admin, marketing, and human resources, like all three. And I'm not a super outgoing I can be with friends, and sports, but it's like my general demeanor is not this crazy outlandish. And one of the things that has always turned me off with sales and marketing is just that the car salesman, the hey, and trying to be your friend, and they're completely full of shit. And on our side, we do still have to get our word out there and market, but it's just in the same with my business partner. He's not like that either. We struggle with marketing without coming off cheesy, if that makes sense, and but not putting too much stuff in. So we've really just done word of mouth. Honestly, maybe the first few years we tried some stuff, but that's just not us. And that's what I have always struggled with business. I'd rather just have, something where we, stand by and put together, and we want to help people with whatever we're doing, but it's like at the same time, it's like I don't want to go out of my way and waste time just being a cheesy, fake salesman. And that's my whole motive, is just money, 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 money. I mean, don't get me wrong, we want to stay in business and make money, and I want to provide for my family as best I can, and my wife and everyone, and that can lead to certain happiness. So you're not, yeah, I understand, we've always been a paycheck to paycheck type fam, so I get it. Like, it can make some things easier, right? But at the same time, it's like this drive, and like exactly what you're saying, the kind of hustle vibe. It's just, yeah, it rubs me the wrong way, and that's something I've always kind of fought, like in that realm of business. It's like I it's just not my cup of tea. Like, it's a tough one to go by.
Well, even Patrick Bet David, who I think is doing, some good work in regards
Yeah.
to like Whitney Webb. He had Richard Gage from
Mhm.
9/11, or the Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, which he's not with anymore, but he, real expert in regards to 9/11 towers and whatnot. And so he's done some great work. But if you go back into his past, like, there's a lot of people who are saying that he's done some really shicey things. And this is kind of it kind of highlights the point that I always make, that like very few, and I say very few because there's always exceptions to the rule. Very few people made a lot of money being a completely moral person.
Yeah.
I just don't I don't see it. I don't believe it. There's too much evidence of the other thing being true, of like they screwed somebody. They were, it's the same thing with Trump. Like, I would hear
Yeah.
of Trump back in the day, about him just not paying his subcontractors, like people going out of business because he would find some reason not to pay him.
Mhm.
I remember there was a story about in Ireland, I believe it was either Scotland or Ireland, where he built some giant golf course and some guy wouldn't sell his property. So he just harassed the shit out of this guy, and he built like this giant, he like dumped a huge, like a fucking giant mountain of dirt in front of this guy's house, like right at the line of his property, just so, and then he couldn't see anything but this giant mountain of dirt every time he looked outside his house, just to her. So it's like, he's not a great dude. Like, I'm not to say,
No.
and anybody at that level, I don't think is a great dude. Not to say that like people can't also eventually see the light, right? And maybe look back and reflect and say, hey,
Yeah.
maybe I fucked up. Maybe I have been, living a lifestyle that I thought was celebrated and would bring me happiness and fulfillment, and now I feel unfulfilled and not happy. So, and maybe you find purpose later in life, but it's, to me, like, it's same thing with London Real, right? Like, I had a friend of mine who, we work out together, and we're big into lifting weights, and he's a big Dorian Yates fan. He knows I'm a big Dorian Yates fan. So he like sent me some like video clip. He's like, hey, you see that video of Dorian Yates saying that Brian Rose gave out a bunch of his email, like he asked his fans for a bunch of email address, something shady that like
Mhm.
Dorian Yates didn't like, and thought it was kind of like, not the most moral thing to do. And I'm like, no, I didn't. And I'm like, but I'm kind of not surprised, because Brian Rose kind of seems like that fake
Mhm.
Rogan, right? And it's like, to me, it just, not to say he hasn't done some good work. Like, obviously, he during COVID, he had that one episode where he brought on a bunch of different doctors, like 100 different doctors, and he had them all on like a Zoom call, and they were all, basically agreeing with, the fact that we're doing more harm than good and all this stuff. And so I'm like, he does, but I think the difference between him and somebody like you or I is that he's driven by maybe getting some of this information out there, but his biggest driver is success financially.
Mhm.
And us, our biggest driver isn't financial success. It can obviously is a driver to some extent because unfortunately we needed to survive, and and we have families and we have other responsibilities, but there's also a line that I won't cross because I have to look in the mirror and I can't. It's growing up writing music, I'd always say I'm like, I could never write a hit because if I wrote that shitty lyric down, I'd be like, this is too stupid to sing, and I don't have it in me to pretend this is good. And it's the
Hmm.
same thing with like being a salesman. Like I don't have it in me to pretend what I'm selling you is way better than it actually is because internally I know I'm lying and I'm not capable of putting on that fake persona, you know, long enough to get you to buy this thing. Like I just can't. Like I couldn't look in the mirror and so to me like you do have to be worried about these people like that. And I think those are the type like so when we talk about capitalism, those are the type of people that come to mind. It's like
Hmm.
that's what capitalism brings, and they are successful like and they financially and I feel like it's a game that if you're willing to play it the way that they play it, you can reach certain lengths. But like like everything, there's a price you pay for that, and that's your reputation. That's it's like even Patrick Bet-David's always talking about how much he works. He's traveling all over the place, business, and I'm like, well, when does he fucking spend time with his kids? Like you ever think about that? I'm like, he's like in Miami, then he's over here, then he's doing a conference over here. Like that's even like his interview with Kobe and
Hmm.
Shaq. Like when he did those interviews, like that wasn't a valuetainment interview. That was like a
Hmm.
part of some other like a multi-level marketing thing,
Oh.
which is basically a pyramid scam. And
Hmm.
it's like that's how he got and he gets all these people like, look how successful I am, and I'm having this interview with this person. It's like it's a pyramid scam. And what you're doing is you're doing the same thing that cults do, and they take advantage of people who don't have any options or people who are just looking for guidance, and then they think you give them this false sense of guidance, and then all of a sudden you think like, oh yeah, if he did it following these steps, then I'll do it too, and it's going to work for me. And that's one thing I've always given Rogan a lot of credit. He seems a lot more like you and I than he does Patrick Bet-David or Brian Rose in regards to like he just does what he loves, and he got fucking lucky that like
Hmm.
it blew up, but he still was motivated by just doing what he liked and talking to people he liked, and he didn't care. And guess what? He got a lot of backlash for having conservatives on. I remember
Oh yeah.
first time he had Crowder on and all this
Hmm.
stuff. It's like, oh, well, you had a conservative comedian on, whatever. So, and it's like he did what he liked. And so to me, like I relate to somebody like him a lot more. And that's why I'll go to bat for somebody like Rogan much quicker than I will like some of these other guys.
Yep. 100%. I think he found a obviously obviously he found a good niche because look how successful he's been. I grew up more in the mornings listening to Howard Stern every morning, and so that was my morning drive until around the 2020. Then I went from blast like just listening to Howard every day to blasting Ryan Christian's stuff with my windows down so people could hear what he's talking about. But then I kind of found Rogan, and when he used to be on there, he did a lot of similar like I'm not by saying this I'm not saying he sucks at stand up. It just wasn't my cup of tea, his stand up, like kind of like even when he took over, I remember on the Man Show for a little bit at being as a kid. I think I was always going to like at the time, obviously I can't stand him now, but Jimmy Kimmel and Corolla were the original guys. So when Rogan and Stanhope came on, I was like, they're just too loud, and I wasn't a big Fear Factor guy. And it was, but when the way he does his podcast is like the way when Howard kind of even switched to doing long version interviews, and people really got more of a full story, very relaxed. He's more calm, and it's just a very flowy conversation, if that makes sense. I think that's what really took off, was like you could really see a personal side and a deep conversation with a lot of these people, regardless of who he had, whether it's like some guy from USC or a left wing or right wing or another comedian. Like there's always a pretty good mix of, but it's the way I think it's set up. It's not just, yeah, it doesn't have that fake or intensity. It's very laid back and chill, and I can relate to that a lot more.
Yeah, without a doubt. And he just did what he enjoyed, and he made not more than just a living doing it. He became one of the biggest shows on the planet. And to me, I wish that inspired more people to do that than like the Patrick Bet David, Brian Rose, like, let me just sell you a bunch of stuff. Hey, just go to my website if you want to watch the whole video and buy this product. Like I don't even understand the motive with like a Patrick Bet David or a Brian Rose to sell products. I'm like, you already are loaded. Like I do a couple sponsors and they're like, again, it's Richard Grove,
Yeah.
Matt from Content Safe, and,
Mhm.
and Rob Wolf. They've all been on the show. They're all I consider friends of mine, people that I enjoy their work and I think are important. And it's like, I if I had if I was getting enough money from Patreon or just support from merch or whatever, I wouldn't even bother. Like I
Mhm.
wouldn't, I would just like tell people about the product for free and just like, hey, just here, I use this stuff, and so to me, it's like it's and honestly, I mean, it's basically for free anyways because those sponsors don't really get much. But but to me, it's like I do it because now I have a family, and if I can justify taking time out of my day to do this, if I can help a little bit and promote some products I enjoy, great. But like. Patrick Bet David, I think I told Ryan Christian this on the podcast. Like, I remember at one point I was really close to getting him back on the show, and there was somebody from his team that he had a book that was just coming out, and he said he'd come on and promote it, but I had to buy like 50 copies of his book, and I'm just like, no. I'm like, no. First, I have to admit, I did contemplate it because I'm like, well, he doesn't do a lot of interviews. I'm like, maybe the financial hit's worth it. I'm like, maybe just to have, but then I'm like, no, I'm not falling for this. I'm like, I might buy him and he might not even come on. I'm like, who knows, And so I didn't end up doing it. And I remember telling Ryan, I'm like, but in his defense, it could again. He's a hustler. He probably gets a lot of hustlers that work for him that he hires. Maybe it was somebody who's just like, oh, this will sell a lot of books, and I can justify getting him on the show and be like, hey, and also got him to buy all these books. So who knows? Well, he maybe it didn't come directly from Patrick Bet David, so I don't want to say it was his doing or it was him pushing this mentality. But knowing those type of people, like it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility that they're like, hey, if I do interviews, try to sell some product, try to get the most for your money, So and it just to me, it's a unhappy lifestyle. And if you have the money, like what else do you like? Do you need a bigger house? Do you need more? Like the one thing you can't make more of is time. And it's like you're losing all this time to like focus on a business that gives what type of value back to the world? Like what does it contribute? Like what is it? Like I just don't. If I had all the money in the world, I would do like passion projects like podcasts, and I would read and coach sports because I'd like to connect with kids and be a part of their sports journey. But I definitely wouldn't be doing any like things that are strictly specifically just for making money if I already had money, right? It doesn't make any sense to me.
I'm 100% the same way. I even look back. I know we were, just starting our business and trying to get it, and it was just at the time. I don't think we were married yet with my wife, but like just how much time I spent away, even just that, and I like feel guilty even times like that, just trying to make sure we're going. But I mean, we had less employees at the time, so it was tougher. But especially since having kids, it's like, yeah, it's like if I would be the exact same. Yeah, I'd like to read, I'd like to coach, I'd like to do everything I could with my kids. I remember stumbling upon a handful of like these families. They were like a YouTube channel, so they're very like PG type ones, but like basically they just kind of around that time, they just said, screw it, we're gonna homeschool our kids and just go across the country with an RV, right? And they filmed themselves, and a lot of them got kind of big, and I think they've kind of commercialized a little since then. But I kind of get it. But one of them had a saying. It was something like, "You only have like 18 summers with your kid, you know, until they're really gone." And that kind of hit a little more because even those early ones, it's not like you really have a summer when they're just changing diapers and they're drooling on you. So I was like, yeah, it's like, and not even just summers, right? Like it's every day. But the more I can get home and not miss anything, because even my dad worked a ton, flew all over nonstop, but he still made a lot of I give him a lot of credit for how much he still was able to show up to all my sporting events, like everything we did. I mean, it was super involved for how much he had to travel too. And that meant a lot. Like, and even my grandpa, they live next to us, was able to do that. So that's my strive, and I like doing it. It's not like you just do it so you don't feel guilty, right? It's you like doing it. I like being around. I'm interested in what they're interested in. Yeah, that's how I'd want to spend my time. I mean, yeah, you got to have a business, right? And or work wherever your source of income is to stay alive. And yeah, a little more so you have a little less stress here and there for bills. That'd be great. But yeah, you get to a certain point, it's like, I mean, what are we doing? Like, like what's your other motive in a sense, or maybe that's just not your, maybe you don't. I'm not saying you don't care about your kids, but I don't know. Like maybe that's just not his passion. But I think we're aligned on that side of like that'd be a lot more fun in life and enjoy your time than just stressing about the dollar every 2 seconds.
I love that. You got 18 summers with your
Hmm.
like you sometimes you need that shit to put things in
Hmm.
perspective, right? Because it's like you just wake up every day living the same way and go
Yeah.
through the same routine. You forget that like, some things aren't forever and nothing is forever. And that means even your kids wanting to be around you, that's even opportunities to be around your kid. Um, so I'm the exact same way. Like our we have a small family business and I know that I hurt the business sometimes by mentally not always being there, making sure that I get out on time every day because I want to make sure I can coach my kids, I can be around my kids, I can pick up my kids, I can, be around them as much as possible. But it's a like to me, it's like it's a price it's worth paying for me because it's like I want to be around them. I want to have as much interaction with them as possible. I want to be in their memories when they reflect on life. Like I remember growing up, I don't remember my dad and I having many interactions at all. Like I remember him coming home from work tired, with his construction boots, and he looked exhausted. He looked dirty. And I remember just feeling bad that he looked tired, so we'd leave him alone, and that was it. And then I remember, when I was really little, being Portuguese, it's against our religion not to play soccer, so playing soccer at a young age. But my mother would come bring us, and it was a chore to her, right? And so it's like she would talk to the other moms, not pay any ounce of attention to what I was doing. So after a while, I kind of lost interest. And then I did the whole rebellion thing, played in the metal band, loved guitar, loved skateboarding, BMXing, all that stuff. And then eventually got into lifting weights and basketball a little bit later in life and got back into sports. But, I look back at my life and I'm like, I don't remember my dad, and my dad loves soccer. That's the crazy thing. It's like
Hmm.
if he was involved, I probably would have played it from like my whole life from when I was little because if he was involved and he talked to me about it and shared his passion for it, I would, but to him, he grew up in an era, I was born in northern Portugal on a farm and the the mother took care of all those chores with the kid, right? The father just went and did all the hard labor work and paid the bills, and the mother was nurture and whatnot. So like it was just one of those things where he just wasn't, he didn't see anything wrong with what he was doing, but his mentality is still very similar with my kids, where just like, hey, dad, I can't work on Saturday because we got a game. Oh, your wife can't bring them? It's like, no, no, it's not a
Hmm.
chore that I need taken care of. I want to be there, or when I pick up another coach, my daughter was playing for this local club, and then she also wanted to play for the town. So I'm like, I'll coach you for the town because I coach your brother for the town. And she's like, my dad's like, why are you, doing another coaching thing? And I'm like, what do they pay you? I'm like, I'm like, they don't pay me anything. I'm like, I get paid with the time with the kids and being a part of their lives and hopefully being a positive influence and inspiration and person in their lives. And I absolutely love it. I adore it. But to him, it's like, it's a chore. It's just like, it doesn't, my mother was the same way because of like always living paycheck to paycheck and always be, not one of those people that I'm a hustler. So
Hmm.
high paying job. So like my mother, every conversation was about money. It was always like, you know, why are you doing that? Like, what if you get hurt playing basketball? What if you get hurt playing soccer? What if and then you can't go to work? What if, like everything, every conversation I ever had with my mother was about finances, and it drove me fucking crazy. And to me, like, I didn't even realize until I got older that I related like negativity and money. Like it was like I'm like I don't like money because every time, like growing up, every experience with it was like stressing about it was figuring out like if what I was, if, like nothing was worth doing if it wasn't for it. I'm like, it just was. And I'm like, to me, like it's not even important. Like I could do without it. Like, I don't even need any more than I have. I just need to like sustain what I have, and
Hmm.
this is before I had kids. And then you realize, oh shit, I need a little bit more because
Yeah.
kids are expensive. But, when you're on your own and you're like, no, I'm just supporting myself. I'm like, I don't need a lot of money. I don't need to work on I wouldn't want to work on weekends or work longer. My mother would be like, oh, what, you don't need money? And I'm like, I just don't need like the money on that Saturday that, okay, even if I made $100 on a Saturday, I'm just gonna blow it on something. So
Hmm.
what good is it that I got that? I'm like, and I'm missing that weekend with like my friends or my girlfriend, whoever I was dating at the time or whatever. And so it's like, to me, it wasn't a logical sacrifice to make. And I've referenced this movie a few times because the concept I think is interesting. The Justin Timberlake In Time movie, where you're looking at your wrist and the hours and seconds and minutes of your life are going backwards, right? And so you can look down and see how much time you have left. Like, and I remember watching that movie. And I'm like, what if that was real? What if we could just look down at our wrists and we could just see how much time we have left? And every weekend that work overtime, or every weekend that even conflicts with friends and family and relatives or whatever, and kids and wives or whatever, like, would be different, because now you'd be like, do I, like, time's running out, and do I want to spend this many hours or days or months of my life fighting with somebody or having negative feelings? Maybe I won't hold this grudge. Maybe I'll just let it go. Like, so I think our whole perspective on the way we live our lives would change drastically. The Now the illusion is that, like, that's not real. It's a movie. The truth is it is real. Like, we do have a clock. We just don't see it. And we don't know how
Hmm.
much time's left. But that clock is ticking every single day. And people don't realize that. People need to be reminded of that. I think funerals and wakes are important, because it's like, you need to be reminded that this isn't forever. And sometimes when you wake up every day in the same bed, you have the same cup of coffee, you take the same drive to work, you think like every day is going to be the same. And one day you get surprised and you're like, oh shit, like, bad things happen. And bad things don't just happen to other people. Like, I remember when my wife, her mother passed away of breast cancer. Well, had breast cancer. They did the traditional treatment, which probably
Hmm.
gave her the cancer that ended up eventually
Yeah.
killing her. And but I remember when she passed away, and she was in her 50s, fairly young and whatnot. And my wife took it really, it's obviously
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah.
It's her mother, and she's and I remember just thinking, like, you always hear about, like, that was the first like huge event that happened to our family, that happened directly to us. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, yeah, we always hear these stories of like, oh, this person lost their mother to this disease or cancer or whatever. This person lost their brother because he got in a car. Like, it was always like, it's, you live in this illusion that, like, oh, bad things happen, but it's always to other people. Like, it never happens to my family. Like, nobody really close to me, and then when it did happen, it's like, oh shit, like, we're not spectators in this. Like, bad things can happen to us too. And but again, like, we need those reminders. And the sad thing about some of those sad events happening is, like, it took a while for me to, like, convince my wife, like, listen, like, I know you're really sad, and obviously don't know if you'll ever get over this, or if you'll ever get better, emotionally, um and accept what happened. But the the truth is, like, you can't, like, the best way of showing uh that you're grateful for still being here is, like, being grateful that you're still here. And, like,
Hmm.
don't take for granted that we're still here and the people who are still here. And I think, I've seen it with even friends of mine, where, like, they lost a loved one and then they just never recover. And it's like, okay, well, the best way of showing appreciation is enjoying the people that are still here and not taking that for granted, right? Like, so maybe you took this person for granted, thinking they're going to be here forever, and they're not. But, like, now it's like they would want you to live your life to the fullest, and enjoy it as much as you can while you're here, because, again, like, we get these reminders that tomorrow's not guaranteed.
Well said. Yeah. No, I'm 100% on that. I'd say, not to reiterate, 2020 again, but that was another thing that kind of helped helped me realize, not that I kind of got that awakening having each kid, like, oh wow, this is like, besides the huge responsibility, once you have a kid, it's like you get that connection and want to spend as much time. But that also helped me, like, the few people that were still talking to me, like, reach out and expand to more family members and friends that I haven't talked to as much, and kind of expand that circle of appreciating, like, where you're at, who you still have in your life, even if they're live across the country or whatever. And then making new friends, like, Scott was one I met. That was like a whole new bridge of people I met, which was really cool to, like, like-minded people. But then also with their takes on life, you get, like an idea of, like, oh yeah, sometimes I get too much in a grind of stuff, or like I get frustrated because, kids can be kids in the morning and you're trying to get stuff and get out the door, and you get a routine where sometimes it's just like, okay, you take a deep breath and just, like, embrace the chaos sometimes and be like, actually, yeah, as much as it kind of sucks, this is actually kind of cool and fun. And, like, sometimes you just, like the age old saying of forgetting when I was a kid and doing crazy stuff, or, and my parents would get on me or something like that. And sometimes I feel like I get on them too much. And sometimes that's my own fault of being stressed at work or something like that, or traffic gets me upset, something dumb, and it helps to be able to step back sometimes and realize, oh yeah, like, let's enjoy this ride as much as we can while we're here.
That's so important. That's the other thing about the sacrifice. It's not just like working on weekends and working overtime will just take away time from your friends and family and hobbies and things you enjoy, but it also makes it harder for you to enjoy those things when you have the time for it, because now you got more work that you're thinking about. You're more fatigued, you're more tired, you're more everything, and then maybe you don't have the energy to really be in the moment and enjoy the time that you do have with your kids and the time you do have with your wife, your husband, whoever it may be, and you're not getting the best version of you, and that's important too. Like, that's the I don't talk about work at all with my wife. Like, my wife she works at a restaurant, and people will be like, "Hey, I saw your husband on whatever street in whatever town working." She's like, "Oh, God, I didn't even know he was there." She's like, "You didn't know? How do you not know?" He's like, "He doesn't talk about work." And I'm like, "That's how I deal with it. I deal with it by not talking about it, because if I talk about it, like, as you saw when I started talking about COVID again,
Yeah.
you like start reliving it and you get frustrated again. So if I'm talking about a frustrating part of work, my work day, I'm gonna relive it while I'm telling the story, and I'm gonna get worked up, and and then it's gonna ruin my time with the person I'm with. It's like, you know, I'm not against sharing some things that happen at work, but I'm like, I'd like to just focus on other things when I'm with my friends and family, and not, one of my best friends is a detective, and he doesn't hang out with other cops. He's like, all they want to do is talk about cop stuff. And he's like, I need to get away from it. And he's like, so all his friends are people who don't talk about it, or people who aren't in that world, because that way he can kind of detach from it. And, I think that's why the divorce rate is so high. I think that's, how many people, like, the majority of cheating happens at work because we spend more time at work with our work family than we do our actual family. We come home, we're all out of energy, we're all out of patience, we're all out of, our significant other is not seeing the best version of us, so it's like, that's stuff we all need to work on. And that's also why exercise,
Oh
uh,
yeah.
sunlight, being outside, doing things you enjoy for the sake of you enjoying it. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with just doing something for just because you enjoy it, and make time for it. Okay. Fuck the extra money. Fuck the weekend that you're working. Like, go for a hike, whatever you like doing, go for a hike. Maybe you used to rollerblade, but go rollerblade, just do whatever. Like, it just reminded me of this a joke of, like, I think I heard somewhere, they're like, "Oh, I can't rollerblade anymore. The gays took that away from us." It's it is true. I'm like, every time I see a guy rollerblading, he's probably gay. Um, but um, but obviously, like, BMXing. I grew up with people who skateboarded, BMX, rollerbladed. Like, Why not get a skate? Who cares if you're fucking 30 something? Like, go get
Mhm.
a skateboard. Like, play with your kids. Like, try. I have a friend of mine. She told me that she's a little older than I am, so she's in her early 40s, and our kids play soccer together or whatever. And she's like, I just took up skiing. She's like, I don't know why. She's like, in my early 40s. Why am I taking up skiing? I'm like, but I love that. I'm like, be spontaneous, do something new, and not just that. Like, as you know, like when you have kids like enjoying it with your kids makes it that much better and more special. So, yeah, I mean, we have to take care of ourselves, not just physically, but mentally. Uh, and so many of these things help your mental health. And a lot of people who are constantly chasing money and constantly chasing promotions, those are the things they're sacrificing. The time to meditate, the time to have a glass of wine and relax at the end of the day and have a conversation with your wife and talk or whatever. Like the time, of being around your kids, going to the park with them and having the energy to actually play with them and
Yeah. Yeah.
which requires a lot of energy. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of our just depression and unhappiness and even our conflict, right? Like that's the other thing. Like I think we live in a world full of unhappy, unfulfilled people. And then when you can have a place to release that anger and energy, and you can say, hey, these people are the bad people, and you can do the whole divide and conquer thing where like the conservatives think every liberal's the
Mhm.
worst of the worst, and every liberal thinks the conservatives are the worst of the worst. Like you're just internally unhappy, and now you have somewhere to like get some of that frustration out on somebody else. But it's a you problem. It's not,
Yeah.
like you can be in complete chaos and like you said, and still find peace and still be like, like everything around me's going to shit, but I'm in a good place. Like I'm dealing with it. I'm not, I'm not gonna let it get to me. It's like one of my favorite quotes. If you change the way you look at things, what you look at changes. It's all perspective.
100%. Yeah.
See, this is why I wasn't worried about you doing too much talking because I knew eventually I would do too much talking.
You're good. You're good. No, it's all true though. I mean, the more we can focus on this stuff, I think people in sense will be so much more happy and less bitter and less divisive. I mean, yeah, people are gonna have their sticking points and they get succumb to stuff, but we embrace our focus on ourselves and our basic life, whether it's eating, dealing with stress, working out, however you do, hiking, like you said, find those little things to help your life, whether you have kids or not, and like embrace those things about taking care of yourself and your family. Like you'll be so much happier to where these bigger things aren't, it just rolls off your back.
Now, before we end, I am curious about one, your jersey, and two, what type of music are you into?
Oh, yeah. Jersey, this is even though they had a terrible weekend, Scotland rugby jersey. So rugby was another sport I played. Um, and that's one I still play from time to time, which is a good stress relief, even though I'm getting older, but it's still fun to get out there. And so I've always been a big fan of that since about high school is when I started. And so that's that. So it's been a rough, they're doing their Six Nations right now, with England and Wales and France and Italy. So it was a rough weekend last week. So hopefully this weekend goes better. But it probably won't because they play Ireland. They're one of the best in the world. So music wise, gosh, it's definitely evolved over my time. Like I always like to know like what people end up listening to when they were younger around their parents to see if it like affected them or if they went complete opposite way. Like I grew up, my parents had, I mean, granted, it was just, it was the old cassette tape. So you just listen to whatever they had. And so it was a lot of, I mean, it was a mix, but it was, a lot of Motown, a lot of like Sam Cooke, but then we also got a lot of like you get random Bruce Springsteen, Beatles, things like that. And then they were graduated in 68 and 69 for high school. So they're, kind of that boomer age. Um, so I didn't get a lot of exposure to like especially metal and other rock until later. Like honestly, I didn't even know about AC/DC until I hit high school, like at all. And then when I heard it, I was like, even I know that's not even close to metal, but just a good rock. I was like, what is this? I was like, this is sweet. So when we moved to Oregon, my parents decided they wanted to get out of. They lived in inner cities, suburbs, regular neighborhoods. When they moved here, they wanted property, and they were lucky enough to get a little outside of town and just get some horses. That's just what they wanted to do and get away from stuff. So naturally, they all of a sudden started listening to country music, and I mean, it was okay. It wasn't necessarily the radio country. I have there is certain country I like. It's more of like a red dirt alternative type that really isn't country. That's I always like stuff that wasn't on the radio, if that makes sense. I started getting, I think one of my first albums I got when I was really into younger was the Snoop Dogg Doggy Style and the Chronic 2001 with, Dre and Eminem and all those guys. And then it got me really into like Black Star and Talib Kweli and those kind of hip hop and, Wu Tang and all those guys. So that was a big thing for a while. I like that. I still do. I love like hip hop that's not as, mainstream. I did like a lot of, I know you mentioned a lot of like, sometimes you just like music that makes you feel, even if it's like makes you feel shitty in a way sometimes, like I kind of like that. So like there was a lot of like alternative rock. Like, I mean, I'm so all over the place. It's just like I would do back then, like the Postal Service, Modest Mouse, and then I'd go to like Flogging Molly or Real Mackenzie's or Dropkick Murphys, like more of a, kind of Irish punk. I never got exposed to a ton of metal as much. I mean, it'd be more the mainstream, I'd say, like the Panteras or the Slipknots or the there's a few others that come to mind, but the real in-depth ones. And then I got really into a lot of, I guess you could say, folky or kind of more island music with a lot of the guys I used to play with were from Tonga. And so I got really into a lot of that with like John Butler Trio, who's more folky, but I love his stuff from Australia. Really good on the guitar. He's got some really cool, if you ever watch his Ocean video, I don't know if you've seen that, but it's pretty impressive. You should check it out. But then, like Jay Boog and all those kind of guys and Rebulation and those kind of like fun vibe, laid back. Those are good summer, just kind of hanging back kind of music. So I mean, as you can tell, I'm all over the map when it comes to music. And that's why it's seasonal for me. I go in these modes. If I'm not doing podcasts I'm listening to, I get in these music modes when my kids aren't wanting me to play their stuff, which can get fun.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way because my wife grew up dancing and not on a pole, but like in a like
yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean.
But she always loved dancing. She always loved music that made her dance. She liked Spanish music, she liked whatever. And so when we started dating, I'm like, nah, I'm like, this, your music is like pointless. It's just like there's no lyrics that are meaningful, there's no purpose, there's no emotion. And then like in time, I'm like, okay, like she likes music just as much as I do. Like I always had this interpretation of like, oh, if you listen to this type of music, you don't really like music. You're like, this is just like whatever, background noise. But then I'm like, oh no, she likes music for a emotional reaction. Just her emotional reaction that she enjoys is like, rhythms that make her want to get up and dance and bring happiness to her, right? So then I started appreciating that. And I've always been into industrial music and EDM and electronic music. I was a Prodigy guy back in the day, and KMFDM and a lot of I even like some of the 90s industrial stuff like early Stabbing Westward and Gravity Kills and stuff like that. But I'm like, okay, like I appreciate your stuff, and I've always been a fan of culture. I love culture. I love like just music that would have like different cultural vibes. And I remember like Sting's Desert Rose. Remember that?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I love that song. I'm like, oh, it's a mix of like Sting and like, just a completely different type of music. And it's same thing with Latin music and anything like that. I have friends from all parts of the world. So like if I was with my El Salvadorian friends, like they had the Spanish music playing. If I was with my Guatemalan friends, they got, more of a Mexican sounding music playing, so it's like my Lebanese friends with the Middle Eastern music. And I just embraced it all, Jamaican friends with the Caribbean music. And so you end up appreciating all these types of music for their thing, and I started enjoying like the idea of like, just music to bring people together and dance. And then I realized like that's kind of what Portuguese music is, because I grew up hating Portuguese music because my parents would always have it blasting and it was cheesy to me. It was like just basically like Portuguese polka music, and it was and the lyrics were always cheesy, and I'm like, but they would get up and dance, and it at you have a little family gathering, and we would always have accordion laying around. Somebody pick up the accordion, and next thing you know, people are dancing, and I'm like, this is nice. I'm like, not music doesn't always have to be depressing or angry or whatever, and it's like whatever emotion it's bringing out. It's good, and we enjoy it because of that, because it brings out something, and that's when you feel the most alive. When you're listening to like some metalcore that makes you want to get up and break something, or some real depressing, moody music that makes you reflect on life, or if it's just some fun, music that makes you want to get up and dance. It's like whatever it is, it's like sparking some emotion and something internally, and all of them are okay, and they're all important, and they're all probably something we should focus more on, like this idea of just like enjoying the art and just being together with people, and so it's yeah, so as time went by, like I think I listen to a lot more Latin music now than I used to, and uh my kids play futsal, and in the futsal world, like they always got music playing, so it's always like Spanish music or Caribbean music, and I love it all. I love, I like some, even the UK rappers that have like some of the Caribbean influence and stuff like that. So yeah, I think as you get older, maybe you expand your horizons a little bit, and you're more open to other types of genres. But also, let's, before I let you go, also let's
Sure.
your business if you would like, and I don't know if that's something you want to plug, but if and then also your podcast, all the platforms you're on, where they can get it when you stream it live, because you also do that, and also thank you for your time, because I've taken a lot of your time.
No, you're good. No, this has been a great. I love it. This is a good combo. Yeah. Oh, our business is just called, Big Frog Custom T-shirts. It is like a franchise, but we're individually owned. So that's just our place in Oregon. And we, starting with started talking with Scott, and that's how we do a few merch shops for even like Scott's and AM Wake Up and Liberty Radio. We do a few there. So that was kind of fun to get a few basic shops going for those guys. And then, yeah, the podcast is just, I just put some clips for the week called the Independent Review. And I really just I originally did it kind of for myself and my kids, just to archive stuff. And now it's just kind of turned into a thing where Steve asked me to be on Friday, where they air it live on their Rumble and Rockfin, which is nice because I can't get on Rockfin. So that's kind of nice. YouTube when they allow it. And then Odyssey, I'll always just put on there because I like that people can download it from there. And then basically any kind of podcast form, I put it on Podbean, which I think just puts it on everything like Apple and Spotify and all that stuff. Try to make it fun. And the main point, honestly, of that, and the website I link it to, is just so people, it's not necessarily even to promote me, because I mean, like you said, like I don't do this for money. It doesn't make anything. It's just kind of a fun niche thing to document stuff. But if it can be used to help share to other people to get them into shows, or even just to get into this realm of independent media, that's like my main secondary goal besides giving information for myself. It's just like, if it can open one person's eyes, or like, hey, actually, who's this Ricky guy, or who's this James Corbett guy? Like, that's kind of cool. Like, maybe, how else would they see it? Because it's just kind of on an unknown, nonpartisan type platform. But if it's not that, honestly, I just say, if you want to go to the site, it's more to direct people to guys like you, because that's my main focus too. Is I think, obviously, I'm not a big platform. I don't have a lot of followers or thing. I'm pretty new at this, but anything I can do to get people like yourself out there more is what I want. And that's not just to keep people in the same circle of like, hey, only listen to these people, but it's a whole realm that people don't know about and I didn't know about. And the more I feel like we can share it and help, independent media journalists, because it's not an easy realm. I see how much guys, it's tough to get by with a lot of that and get exposure, whether it's the algorithms or just finances, like a lot of them work their butts off, and I feel like, like I can't feel for them because I don't do it, but I get it. Like it's got to be frustrating. So anything I can do to try to help spread it, that's basically my goal. So if you don't look at me, go to those places, just go straight to them. Go to all these independent places. That's kind of my goal.
Well, you're definitely starting a ripple, and all my this show is actually really big in all the English speaking countries. So a lot of the rugby countries like Australia and Scotland and Ireland. So I know all those listeners are going to appreciate your love for rugby and the fact that
Love it.
so that's a really cool. And yeah, and that's one of those sports that's like everybody has respect for. Like nobody wants to mess with a rugby player, you know.
It is not a side tangent too, but it's like, besides the independent media, like the people I've met like yourself, that's the only other sport I've played where like the community is like the best, as far as like welcoming. Doesn't matter where you're from, like you could go play with some old boys, play with some young kids. Like it's just, I don't know, it's something it's hard to explain other than just it's the most accepting, cool, fun, kick-ass kind of culture I've been around.
I think some of those sports like rugby and soccer that are so internationally
Mhm.
popular, it brings so many different types of people that if you play that sport, you can't help but like we play pickup soccer every Sunday night, and you know you some of them are Lebanese, some of them are Spanish, some of them are Portuguese. Like it's a mix, and it's like if you play these sports, like you can't help but constantly be around people from different countries and different cultures. And so you end up like growing up with like, just a love and appreciation for people that are different than yourself, and so yeah, that's kind of the beautiful thing about sports. As long as they don't turn in, I know a lot of people
Yeah,
look at sports and alternative media community like, oh, it's just, mindless entertainment and it's just, it's stupid. But I see a lot of benefit in playing it and your kids being around it, learning social skills, learning discipline, learning unselfishness. So I'm sure you're probably gonna inspire your kids to probably dibble dabble in some sports too growing up, I'm sure.
I've already tried. Yep. It's a mission. Yeah. Yeah. We got him going. The little guy's already got a little ball, and I built like a little goalpost for him. And so he'll kick the soccer. He does everything: soccer, basketball, baseball, football, rugby. He does it all. So he's not, at least he likes it from now. I'm not going to shove it down his throat, but I'm definitely itching him. And my girl does dance and cheer and gymnastics, and I'm trying to get her to try some other team stuff that she would like, just to expose her to that, because I think team stuff is good too for building stuff for him.
Yeah, without a doubt. Well, I'll put links to all that stuff and more in the show description. Is if there's anything that you'd like me to put in the show description, please let me know. And also let me see if I can help you out with Rockfin. Maybe I can send an
Oh,
email
thanks.
and get you on Rockfin. Even though they if people are listening on Rockfin, you can find his show on Fridays, like you said,
Mhm.
on AM Wake Up, so you can find the episodes live stream there. And like you said, a lot of episodes are still on YouTube and whatnot. So you are on many platforms. You're also on Twitter, right?
Yep, Twitter. I think it's IND review. So I'll just retweet all that stuff there. And then anytime I see a lot of you guys post stuff, I'm not really tweeting myself. It's just retweeting other things I see if it's funny or real.
I don't.
That's
I
about it.
rarely ever, comment on anything and
Yeah.
just kind of use it as a platform to share
Yeah.
cool stuff. But thank you so much, Ryan,
Yeah.
for taking so much time out of your day to chat with me about everything and anything. I wish you all the best of luck with the business, with parenting, which is the greatest gift ever, and I can tell you're much like myself, really embracing and enjoying it. And hopefully we talk again in the near future. Hopefully, we'll get you on one of the Union the Unwanted episodes too. You're already friends with a lot of those guys anyway, so
Oh, that'd be fun. Yeah, that's oh, I love that show. It's a good conglomeration. Your last one was really awesome too. I'm about three-quarters of the way through it, catching up on it. It's good. I love it. That's a great show.
awesome. Well, we'll definitely have you on. We're actually, it's funny that I bring it up because I've been meaning to text the guys and like, hey, are we doing one Monday or not or whatever. So,
Mhm.
once I figure out when the next one is, I'll definitely keep you in the loop and hopefully you can join us. And, like I said, we'll definitely keep in touch.
Thanks. I appreciate it, Ricky. I appreciate having me on. I'm humbled because I mean the list of people you've had on here, I'm a pretty low level person. So I'm very honored, and yeah, thanks for taking the time. I know you're busy too. So I appreciate it, man. This has been fun.
Yeah, without a doubt. Well, that's what I love about the show is sometimes like the real popular person that comes on, like it's like in an hour, I'm like, I'm done with this conversation. And but with yourself we've had, I mean, the time flew by. I looked at the time
Mhm.
like, holy shit, I'm like
Yeah, I know.
so yeah, I mean, that's there's tons of people out there like ourselves. I mean, who the hell am I? I'm just like you. I'm like just a guy who's trying to do something, to give back to the world and hopefully leave the planet a little bit better for my children than I received it, and then do my part in doing that. So I think there's many of people like who will look at us and maybe we inspire them to the everyday average Joe to get up and maybe just do something, anything,
Mhm.
whatever it may be. Start your own little ripple. So, um,
Yeah.
thank you. Thanks, Ryan. Hey, enjoy the rest of your day. And like I said, we'll keep in touch. I'll send links to the show when it's up and live. And everybody tune in to the independent review and see if maybe he snips a part out of this episode first. Thanks, Ryan.
We'll
Take
see. Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it, Ricky. Have a good one.
you too. See ya.
See ya.